The coffee was still warm when Eleanor Price vanished from the small town of Fulton, Missouri, population 11,206. The night of September 12, 1979, arrived with a steady autumn drizzle that blanketed all of Callaway County. At 9:18 p.m., a waitress at the roadside diner on Route 54 watched Eleanor, a 34-year-old accountant, slip on her beige coat, pick up a brown umbrella, and leave after a late dinner. She was believed to be driving her silver Ford Pinto back to the Lakeview Inn, where she was renting a room short-term during a work week. The next morning, Eleanor's car was found in the parking lot. Interior lights still on, driver's door slightly ajar, keys still in the ignition. What happened in the hours that followed would haunt Missouri for nearly 4 decades. Before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss the latest cases. In the fall of 1979, Missouri was steeped in the slow, deliberate rhythm of a classic Midwestern farm state. Small towns along the Missouri River, like Fulton, lived by the steady pulse of factories, stores, and Sunday church services. Old asphalt streets, neon diner signs flickering through the fog, and AM radio from passing pickups still broadcasting news about fuel prices and drought. In that picture, Eleanor Price, 34, an accountant at the local dairy plant, was an unremarkable woman everyone knew for her neatness and punctuality. She lived alone in room 7 of the Lakeview Inn, a 2-story gray brick motel beside Route 54. Every morning, Eleanor left the motel at 7 sharp, carrying her old leather briefcase, crossed the parking lot, stopped at the Maple Diner for coffee, then headed to the plant. In the afternoons, she left work around 5:30, returned to her room, turned on the desk lamp, and spent the evening balancing her expense ledger. People in town described her as polite, quiet, with almost no close friends. On the evening of September 12th, light rain was falling. Eleanor got off work and, as usual, stopped at the Maple Diner. The waitress remembered. She ordered black coffee, no sugar, sat at the counter for a few minutes, then left. Around 8 o'clock, another customer saw her walking toward the motel, wearing her beige coat and carrying a light brown umbrella. That was the last confirmed sighting of Eleanor Price. That night, no one noticed she hadn't returned. Her private habits meant few people paid attention. The next morning, at the dairy plant, Eleanor's desk remained empty, unsigned files stacked neatly. The shift manager tried calling the motel, no answer. By noon, he notified HR that the accountant had been absent all morning. As the workday neared its end, he decided to contact the Fulton Police Department to report Eleanor Price missing. The report was taken late that afternoon in the Fulton PD duty room. A young officer, new to the shift, read the details aloud for the desk sergeant to sign off. Female, 34 years old, accountant, residing at Lakeview Inn, absent over 24 hours, no contact. The file was immediately passed to Sergeant James Darnell, the Criminal Division's lead investigator. Darnell, 42, had a habit of reviewing every report before leaving the office and lingered longer over this one. He had handled plenty of temporary disappearances, but what caught his attention was this woman's clockwork routine, a person whose daily schedule never varied by a minute. He called the dairy plant to double-check. The manager's response only heightened his unease. Eleanor Price had never taken sudden leave or missed a day without notice. Darnell decided to visit the scene himself. Also inside the cabinet was a leather-bound notebook containing scattered geological data and river-level readings. Tucked inside was a torn scrap of paper with handwriting. Check South Inlet, night sample, 9/12. The date matched the exact night Eleanor disappeared. Duval read the line slowly, then looked at Holden. Neither spoke, they simply nodded to confirm seizure. The room was further scanned with UV light across the concrete floor. Under the purple glow, faint luminescent streaks appeared, trailing toward the back door. Sampling revealed dried mud mixed with old fabric fibers. Rapid on-site analysis showed the mud contained montmorillonite and illite minerals, characteristic of the lower Missouri River region around Fulton. The technician concluded, mud traces consistent with central Missouri stratigraphy, Duvall ordered full photography and sealing under code E22, soil traces. Every item was documented with exact coordinates, time of collection, and handling officer. On the table, the worn Red Wing 877 boots lay next to the discolored ID card. Two objects separated by 4 decades, now side by side in the same case file. She stood still for a moment, feeling the once vague case beginning to take solid shape. After completing the basement search, the team moved to the backyard garage, which contained numerous old tool crates. In one corner was a small wooden box bearing a shipping label from Kansas City, 1981. Inside were work clothes, rubber gloves, and a torn piece of fabric embroidered with the letters MI, the abbreviation for Midwest Infrastructure. Everything was seized and coded E23, work gear. The 6-hour search concluded with Holden drafting the summary report, total of 14 evidence items seized, including Red Wing boots, victim's ID card, 1979 Fulton Dam engineering map, field notebook, Missouri stratigraphy consistent soil samples, and related personal items. All evidence was sealed, signed for, and transported back to BCA St. Paul that same afternoon. Duvall sent an immediate electronic report to MIB, briefly summarizing direct victim-linked evidence discovered on suspect's property. Physical condition indicates dry, sealed storage, highly likely preserved unchanged since 1979. As the team left Bloomington, thick clouds covered the sky and a cold wind blew, stirring up the yellowish dust on Lawson's old boots, the same trace that, nearly 40 years earlier, had been imprinted outside room 7 at the motel in Fulton, and now had reappeared in the basement of his house, nothing less than a silent testimony from time itself. Immediately after the evidence from the Lawson residence search was transported to the BCA St. Paul laboratory. The forensic team began detailed analysis of each soil sample scraped from the Red Wing 877 boot soles and from the basement concrete floor. Sarah Duvall flew back to Missouri carrying the original Missouri River area geological files for comparison and formally requested the University of Missouri, Columbia Forensic Geology Lab to perform comparative sediment analysis. On July 2, 2018, Dr. Martin Coyle, a sedimentary geology expert, received the 2 samples, E20E, from the boot sole, and E22 from the basement floor. In his descriptive report, he noted the initial physical characteristics, reddish-brown color, fine particle structure, high cohesiveness, with iron oxide and organic staining, classic aged alluvial soil from the lower Missouri River. To ensure accuracy, Coyle requested Duvall provide control samples taken directly from the riverbank near Fulton Dam, specifically the south bank where handkerchief E2 had been found in 1979. On July 4, the Missouri forensic team returned to the old scene, now overgrown with weeds and with fast-flowing muddy water. They drilled 6 2-meter soil cores, each preserved in PVC tubes, and labeled F1, F6. The samples reached the Columbia lab within 24 hours to prevent moisture change. He and 2 officers drove south on Route 54 toward the Lakeview Inn, tucked against a hillside, its faded vacancy sign blinking dimly through the mist. The rain had just stopped. The wet pavement reflected their headlights. When they arrived, the motel was nearly deserted, only the owner closing his ledger at the front desk. The man confirmed Price was still renting the room. No one had seen her since the previous evening, and her car was still in the lot. He handed over the key to room 7 and said quietly, her room light was on all night. Darnell walked the ground floor hallway under flickering fluorescent lights, past a water-stained carpet. The door was closed but unlocked. He pushed it open gently. The room was softly lit by the desk lamp still burning. The bed was neatly made, covers smooth, no sign anyone had slept in it. On the desk, her open expense ledger, a coffee cup with dried residue, a ballpoint pen laid diagonally across the page. In the closet, everything hung neatly. Her suitcase sat in the corner, purse on the chair, no indication she had packed to leave. Darnell knelt and shone his flashlight on the floor. A few small dried mud streaks ran from the back door toward the desk. He marked them with chalk and had an officer photograph them. The window was locked from the inside, curtains half drawn, no pry marks. He opened the mini fridge, milk, butter, and unused food portions remained. Outside in the parking lot, they located Eleanor's light blue Ford Pinto. Doors locked, keys, wallet, and documents visible inside, as if the owner had stepped away for just a moment. No signs of a struggle, no missing property, no evidence of voluntary departure. Darnell jotted in his notebook, Room 7, scene intact. Occupant missing, personal items in place, requires full forensic exam. He ordered the room sealed and filed a preliminary report. As they left the Lakeview Inn, night had fully fallen. Wind off the lake blew cold past the rusted sign, its dim light rippling on the water. That evening, in the Fulton station log, the case Eleanor Price, disappearance under unknown circumstances, was officially opened under case number 7947. Early the next morning, while fog still blanketed Fulton Lake, the Callaway County crime scene team arrived at the Lakeview Inn. Sergeant James Darnell was already waiting. Preliminary file and overnight seal report laid out on the front desk. The motel remained quiet. Only a few upstairs guests peeked through their curtains. Lead technician Inspector Harold Boone ordered the scene preserved. No one was to enter the west hallway near room 7. When the seal was removed, he directed full photographic documentation from hallway to interior, using Polaroid and 35mm cameras. Low light required portable flashes. Images were taken in sequence: door, desk, bed, kitchenette, back door. Boone logged each photo number and location, while 2 technicians began fingerprint dusting. They used aluminum powder and soft brushes on doorknobs, light switches, chair arms, tabletop, closet handles, and window frames. Numerous prints were lifted, most smudged or overlapping, only a few clear enough to be taped, placed in clear plastic sleeves, and labeled E02 through E07. Darnell observed and took detailed notes. He requested close-ups of the desk where the expense ledger lay open. A technician wearing nylon gloves carefully turned the pages, handwriting neat, no hurried scrawl or erasures. The last entry dated 9/12, matching the disappearance. The coffee cup's dried residue ring was bagged as E08, along with the metal spoon and swab samples. They re-examined the mud streaks Darnell had noted near the back door. Under bright lights, 3 overlapping prints were clearer. Direction from outside inward, spacing irregular. One near the carpet edge showed a distinct heel impression, toe area blurred into the tile. Boone knelt, measured, and photographed with scale cards. He labeled it E1. Footprint. Darnell noted the sole pattern was common, 3 horizontal grooves, likely men's size 10, 11 US. Dried mud flecks around the edges indicated the prints were made after the rain had tapered off, most likely the same night. Eleanor vanished. Outside the back door, they checked the concrete walk to the parking lot, but overnight rain had washed away nearly all traces. Darnell had soil samples taken for comparison, labeled E1A. While the team continued searching for additional shoe prints, Boone ordered panoramic shots from the door through the hallway, marking table, closet, bed, window, and back door positions on a diagram. The scene sketch was completed in black ink, north arrow toward the window, photo locations marked, evidence dots in red. In the notes section, E1, footprint, beside back door, direction inward was underlined twice. On final sweep, a technician found several hairs on the pillow. They were collected with tweezers and sealed separately, as E09. Darnell ordered one last check of the Ford Pinto in the lot. Doors, still locked, windows fogged, interior tidy. Powder revealed prints on handles, dashboard, and steering wheel, mostly matching those inside the room. The vehicle was resealed as E10 and transferred to county lab custody. Back in room 7, Boone reviewed the full photo series, 42 frames, sharp, comprehensive. Darnell signed off on scene processing completion at 10:45 a.m. Weather overcast 59 degrees Fahrenheit, high humidity. Summary report stated, no signs of struggle, all personal belongings accounted for, sole discovery, muddy shoe print, near back door. Fingerprints, pending analysis. Before leaving, he paused at the threshold, looking across the empty courtyard toward the fog-shrouded lake. In his notebook, he underlined Case 7947, E1 footprint, as the first solid lead in the Eleanor Price disappearance. After the crime scene team left the Lakeview Inn, Sergeant James Darnell returned to Fulton headquarters with all records and collected evidence. He spent that afternoon beginning victim background verification. From administrative records, Eleanor Price was confirmed born 1945 in Columbia, Missouri. Accounting graduate of Central Methodist College, employed at the Fulton dairy plant since 1971. Employment contract, tax records, and criminal history were clean. No priors, no civil complaints, no ties to any organizations or litigation. Permanent address registered at Lakeview Inn, where she had rented long-term for nearly 2 years, paying monthly by bank draft. Darnell had recent financial transactions checked, no unusual withdrawals, no out-of-state transfers, account activity normal. Police contacted next of kin in Columbia, brother Robert Price, for personal confirmation. Over the phone, Robert said Eleanor had lived independently since their parents' deaths. Rarely visited, but stayed in regular contact via letters and Sunday phone calls. The last letter he received was dated September 10th, discussing only work and weather, nothing unusual. Darnell asked Robert to come to Fulton within 2 days with additional documents and forwarded her photo to the Criminal Records Unit for identification posters. Simultaneously, investigators interviewed co-workers. The plant manager confirmed she was exemplary, never absent without notice. Colleagues described her as reserved, no social life outside work, occasional solo weekend grocery trips, no known relatives or friends in town. One accounting clerk recalled that a few days before the disappearance, Eleanor received a strange phone call from a man. The conversation was brief, after which she seemed flustered but shared no details. Darnell flagged this and requested tracing through the local exchange. Initial results showed the call originated from a public payphone at the Southside Shopping Plaza, but the time coincided with shift change, making caller identification difficult. Meanwhile, the lab completed its preliminary evidence report. Mud shoe print E1 confirmed male large size, no match to any shoes recovered in the room or belonging to motel staff. Most fingerprints matched the victim, several unknowns pending comparison. Eleanor's Ford Pinto remained sealed in the motel lot. Darnell and an officer returned for a final check. Inside the trunk, a cloth bag of accounting files, bank receipts, and a small schedule notebook, all undisturbed. Fuel tank nearly half full, odometer unchanged since last inspection, confirming the car had not been driven after September 12th. He added to the report, vehicle stationary, unused, owner absent. Back at the station, Darnell briefed command. He emphasized, clear background, stable job, transparent finances, no known conflicts, no voluntary departure indicators, no violence or theft, car and belongings intact. He recommended upgrading from concern to official missing person status per Missouri protocol. The Callaway County Sheriff approved and signed the order opening formal investigation 7947 MP on September 14, 1979. Search bulletins were sent to neighboring departments, Jefferson City, Columbia, and highway posts along Route 54, with description, photo, height, weight, last seen details, and mention of the light brown umbrella she carried that night. All data was entered into the state missing persons system, with copies to the Missouri State Highway Patrol. That night, in his quiet office, Darnell reread every note. Everything about Eleanor Price was ordinary to the point of absurdity. A woman with no enemies, no debts, no complicated social life, suddenly gone without a trace. He underlined one more line in his notebook: no motive, no signs, no clear direction. The official missing person file for Eleanor Price was completed and stamped in red at 23:40 that day, becoming the 12th case opened in 1979 in Fulton, Missouri. The next morning, after the missing person case was officially opened, Sergeant James Darnell began witness interviews around the Lakeview Inn area. First was motel owner Walter Hicks, 60, who lived at the ground floor office. Hicks confirmed seeing Eleanor leave the Maple Diner around 8 p.m. on September 12, walking back toward the motel in light rain. He briefly saw her cross the parking lot under her umbrella in her beige coat. About 20 minutes later, while turning off the sign, he heard a truck engine behind the building. "I thought it was a delivery or someone upstairs," he said. "But when I looked, a small gray pickup was parked right up against the fence, headlights on, nobody getting out. It stayed a few minutes, then drove off toward Route 54. Darnell pressed for specifics: plate, make, company markings. Hicks shook his head. Rain obscured details. He confirmed no guest at the motel owned such a truck. Next, Darnell spoke with housekeeper Lynn Carr, who had noticed Room 7's light on all night. She said she usually saw Eleanor reading ledgers in the evenings and rarely out late. On the 12th, around 8:30, she passed the slightly open door and saw desk light spilling out. "I figured she just forgot to lock it, so I didn't knock," Lynn said. "When I came back around 10, the light was still on, but no sound." She also remembered an extra vehicle in the lot that night, the same gray truck the owner mentioned. Darnell noted the match and asked for more description. Lynn said small enclosed bed truck. Older, no logos. When asked if she saw anyone nearby, she hesitated, then answered, "There was a man smoking by the corner fence, tall dark green jacket, baseball cap. By the time she looked again, he was gone." Darnell flagged this as the morning's most significant detail. He asked for facial description. Lynn only recalled a tall frame over 6 feet, thin build, deep voice, local accent, when he briefly returned her greeting. The team then canvassed other motel guests. A couple in room 5 said they went to bed early and only heard a large engine start around 8:30. A guest in room 9 recalled headlights sweeping past his window, but no voices. Darnell crossed to the residential houses opposite the motel. A woman named Margaret Neal said that night, while letting her dog out near 9, she saw a silver-gray pickup moving slowly, stop near the fence, then turn sharply. "I remember, because the headlights shone straight into my window," she said. Driver was tall, narrow shoulders, wearing a green jacket. She couldn't see hair color because of the cap, but the engine sounded heavy early 70s model. Darnell asked about the plate. She only recalled the first letters, possibly M or N. He noted, small gray pickup, unclear plate, present 2015, 2045, Lakeview Inn area. All details were entered into the day's report, along with a technician's sketch of the truck's movements. Concurrently, he ordered a check of all registered vehicles in the county, matching the description, focusing on private commercial trucks. That afternoon, Darnell returned to the Maple Diner. Night waitress Cheryl Hayes confirmed Eleanor left around 8, and while closing up, she saw a small pickup moving slowly past the window, yellowed headlights, in closed bed. She thought it belonged to the neighboring store's delivery, but realized the plate wasn't local. She also remembered a man at the counter shortly before, didn't order food, just coffee, dark green jacket, dark brown hair. When Eleanor left, the man left almost simultaneously through the opposite door. Darnell asked for more description. Around 40, tall, seemed to be watching Eleanor rather than knowing her. All statements were typed and compiled, witnesses numbered 1 through 6. A preliminary suspect list was created in 3 categories. The man in the dark green jacket, seen both at the diner and near the motel. Owners of gray pickups, registered in Callaway County, and a delivery driver known to visit the Lakeview area that evening. Darnell highlighted consistencies, vehicle color, timeline, direction, physical build. He ordered the composite sketch unit to produce a suspect drawing from the descriptions. Before ending the workday, he added to his notebook, independent witnesses, consistent descriptions, small gray pickup, man in dark green jacket, present within disappearance window. The day's report was stamped 1940, September 15, 1979, confirming witness phase complete and the first formal suspect profile established in the Eleanor Price missing person investigation. After completing the witness interview phase, Sergeant James Darnell reviewed the guest register of the Lakeview Inn for the night. Eleanor Price went missing. The register showed 7 rooms were rented, among them, Room 9, located at the end of the same hallway as Room 7, was booked by a man named Jerry Lawson, 38 years old, a structural engineer temporarily staying in Fulton to oversee the renovation of the iron bridge on Route 54. This information caught Darnell's attention because Lawson was the one who had reported hearing the sound of a large truck engine and seeing headlights sweep across his window around 8:30 p.m. The exact time other witnesses described the gray truck. He decided to summon Lawson to the station for a preliminary interview. On the morning of September 16th, Lawson arrived right on time. He was tall, thin, wearing a plaid shirt, spoke calmly, and appeared cooperative. Darnell started with basic questions: the reason for being in Fulton, the length of his stay, and any relationships with other guests at the motel. Lawson said he had been in Fulton since July, working for Midwest Infrastructure, staying at the motel Monday through Friday each week, and returning to Jefferson City on weekends. He said he had never met Eleanor Price and only knew she was on the same hallway because he occasionally saw her in passing. Regarding the evening of September 12th, Lawson stated he returned to his room at 8:15 p.m. after eating dinner at the River Grill, about 3 miles from the motel. He showered, watched the news, and went to bed at 9 p.m. When Darnell asked if he heard or saw anything unusual, Lawson replied that he did hear a truck start up and saw headlights sweep across the window, but he didn't think much of it because vehicles often passed on the road behind the motel. He insisted he did not leave his room after 9 p.m. Darnell asked him to list people who could confirm his evening schedule. Lawson mentioned the server at the River Grill and 2 co-workers, the Pritchard brothers, with whom he had eaten dinner. When the restaurant was checked, the manager confirmed Lawson had eaten there that night, but couldn't recall the exact time because the place was busy. The receipt showed payment at 7:48 p.m., but there was no record of when he actually left. Lawson's 2 co-workers said they parted ways after the meal and had no idea when he returned to the motel. This left Lawson's whereabouts between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. unaccounted for. Darnell noted in the report, alibi uncertain. During the interview, Darnell observed Lawson's demeanor. The man stayed calm, sometimes answering too briefly. When asked about the gray truck, Lawson said he only saw the reflection of headlights through the curtains and couldn't identify the vehicle type, but he emphasized that he never left his room and heard no voices or arguing. Darnell asked what kind of vehicle he owned. Lawson replied a brown Chevrolet Impala, parked in the motel lot, keys always with him. Police had already checked and confirmed this. However, in the hallway inspection report, the muddy footprint marked E1 was determined to be from a large men's work boot, the type commonly worn on construction or mechanical jobs, similar to the work boots Lawson was wearing that day. When asked about it, he just smiled and said they were standard safety boots from the job site. Nothing unusual. Darnell made detailed notes and requested Lawson's boots be seized for comparison with the print. Meanwhile, the investigation team verified Lawson's work schedule for the week of the incident. The site foreman confirmed Lawson was present morning and afternoon on September 12th and left the site at 5:15 p.m., not returning afterward. Company vehicle logs showed Lawson's pickup truck did not leave the route between the job site and the motel. However, a nearby gas station reported a fuel purchase using the company card at 7:02 p.m. that day, about 3 miles from the site. When Darnell asked, Lawson said he stopped for gas on the way to the River Grill, but the receipt had no signature. Every detail was plausible on its own, but when pieced together, there was still a gap of more than half an hour. At the end of the interview, Tarnell asked Lawson to surrender the boots he was wearing for forensic testing and to provide fingerprints for comparison with those found in room 7. Lawson agreed, signed the form, and left the station. Tarnell watched him go, noting mentally, the man was calm to the point of being unreadable. No anxiety, no defensiveness, yet his story had odd gaps. Back in his office, Tarnell reviewed all witness statements. Everyone described a tall, thin man in a dark green jacket, features that matched Lawson. The preliminary crime scene report confirmed Lawson's boots had a 3-groove tread pattern similar to print E1, though not yet a conclusive match. Darnell wrote in his notebook, Lawson, room 9. Unaccounted time 20 o'clock, 21 o'clock. Boot tread similar to E1, alibi uncertain. The final note in the report sent to the Callaway County Sheriff read clearly, recommend temporarily placing Jerry Lawson on the suspect list in the Eleanor Price disappearance. After Jerry Lawson was added to the potential suspect list, Sergeant James Darnell ordered an expanded canvass along Route 54, the main artery connecting downtown Fulton to the southern lake area, where stores, gas stations, and small diners Eleanor Price might have passed that night were located. On September 17th, he and 2 field officers split up and worked their way south from the intersection near the Lakeview Inn. The weather was foggy, light was poor, and roadside signs appeared faintly through wet tree cover. They stopped at Miller's fuel stop, about 1.5 miles from the motel, the station Lawson had mentioned in his statement. The owner, Clyde Miller, recognized Eleanor's photo when Darnell showed it to him. She came in a few times, gas and canned coffee, he said. That night, I think I saw her, but she wasn't alone. Pressed for details, Miller recalled that around 7:50 p.m., a gray vehicle pulled up to Pump 2. A tall man wearing a green baseball cap got out to pay cash. He spoke little and had a raspy voice. In the vehicle, Miller caught a glimpse of a brown-haired woman whose face resembled Eleanor's looking out the window. He wasn't certain, but the station lights clearly illuminated her face. He described the vehicle as an older gray-silver panel van with no clear plates. Darnell noted the time perfectly matched Lawson's unaccounted-for window. When asked direction of travel, Miller said the vehicle turned right, heading south out of town. There was no surveillance footage. 1979, most businesses didn't have cameras. The only evidence was witness memory. Next, the team went to McKenna's Mart, about 2 miles farther. The evening clerk, Susan Greer, said around 8:30 p.m., she saw a brown-haired woman come in to buy a soda and a pack of candy. I remember because she asked for directions to Maple Street, Susan said. She was polite, soft-spoken, seemed unfamiliar with the area. When shown the photo, Susan was almost certain it was Eleanor Price. What caught Darnell's attention was Susan's additional detail. Outside the store, a small gray panel van was parked at the curb, engine running, headlights on. As she handed the bag over, she saw a man sitting behind the wheel, hands on the steering wheel, staring toward the store. I didn't get a good look at his face, just remember a dark green jacket with the collar turned up and a baseball cap. Felt like he was waiting for someone. When Eleanor left the store, the man didn't get out. He just leaned over and opened the passenger door for her. Darnell marked it on the timeline map, 2030, McKenna's Mart. Eleanor Price last seen, with an unidentified man in a gray truck. Comparing distances, that location was roughly 4 miles south of the Lakeview Inn on Route 54, meaning Eleanor had either left the motel area or never made it back before encountering the man. The technical team created a movement diagram marking every location and time provided by witnesses. Darnell sent officers back to Miller's and McKenna's to look for additional witnesses, but no one remembered more. Only one long-haul trucker recalled seeing a silver-gray panel van parked near a lake access trail turnoff, about 5 miles out of town, around 9 p.m. No one saw anyone get out. That location was marked as the last known stop on the route. Darnell compiled all the data, 1950. Lawson paid at River Grill, 20 o'clock, 2010 gray truck at Miller's fuel stop. 2030 Eleanor, seen at McKenna's Mart with a man. 2045, 21 o'clock, gray truck last seen, heading south. The timeline formed a coherent sequence that aligned with Eleanor's disappearance and the truck sightings around the Lakeview Inn. Darnell's initial assessment, the last confirmed sighting of the victim, was on the stretch between McKenna's Mart and the Route 54, Sawyer Road intersection, where the road branched toward Lake Fulton. He ordered a search grid within a 5-mile radius of that area and submitted a report to the Missouri State Highway Patrol requesting assistance in locating gray panel vans registered in Callaway and surrounding counties. Returning to the station late that afternoon, Darnell stood before the large wall map, staring at the red pins marking Eleanor Price's final known route, from the dairy plant to the diner, then the Lakeview Inn, and finally, Route 54. He wrote a short line in his notebook, Eleanor, last seen alive, Route 54 South. Approx. 8:30 p.m., with unidentified male in gray truck. On the morning of September 18, 1979, immediately after pinpointing the last known area where Eleanor Price was seen on Route 54, Sergeant James Darnell officially launched the largest search operation the Fulton Police Department had ever conducted in that decade. The mobilization order was issued at 7:15, expanding the search radius to 15 miles from the center of town, covering the entire area south of Route 54, the Missouri River shoreline, and the scattered wooded sections around Lake Fulton. More than 30 police officers, 2 volunteer rescue teams, and 4 tracking dogs from Jefferson City were deployed. The fire department provided watercraft and a dive team to search the river. Darnell personally directed operations on site, dividing the area into 4 concentric search rings at 5, 10, and 15 miles, centered on the Route 54, Sawyer Road intersection. Teams swept outward in a fan pattern, marking checked areas with red-painted wooden stakes. The sky was overcast, a light rain falling, the ground saturated and difficult to search. Darnell stood at the roadside with the map spread on the hood of his car, directing each group, Team A into the eastern woods, Team B along the riverbank, Team C the open lots near an abandoned construction yard, Team D with the dogs down the trails leading to the lake. Every team carried radios, flashlights, marking tape, and evidence bags. Near noon, the Western Search Group reported finding a piece of white cloth mixed in mud near the tree line, just over a mile from the Missouri River. Darnell went immediately to examine it. The cloth was a handkerchief, wet and caked with dirt, but the embroidered initials, EP in one corner, were still clearly visible, matching Eleanor Price's initials. He ordered photographs taken in place, a marker placed, coordinates measured, and the item lifted with tweezers into a plastic evidence bag labeled E2, handkerchief. 11:43 a.m., Riverside Sector B. This was the first piece of physical evidence directly linked to the victim since her disappearance. Darnell surveyed the surroundings. The grass was deeply rutted, with old tire tracks blurred by rain. Nearby trees bore scrape marks as if something hard had brushed against them. He noted, possible vehicle stop or turnaround. Handkerchief may have fallen from door. The technical team mapped the location, photographed the scene, and collected soil samples for comparison with mud found at the motel. After sealing the evidence, the search continued southward along the riverbank. Divers scanned the deeper sections near an old dock, where the riverbed held metal debris. The water was murky and fast-moving, visibility nearly zero. They used anchored guidelines to maintain direction. After 2 hours underwater, nothing relevant was found. On the bank, the tracking dogs followed a scent trail carried by the wind, but lost it in a flooded reed bed. Darnell ordered a check of the abandoned parking area beside the trail. There, an officer found clearer tire mud impressions. Though rain had erased most tread detail, only wheelbase distance remained measurable. He had it photographed and marked a suspected tire track location south grass area. By afternoon, weather worsened. Thick fog forced a temporary halt. The day's summary report read, "Victim not located. Recovered evidence item, E2, handkerchief embroidered EP at Riverside location. No signs of violence or primary crime scene." The next morning, the search resumed, extending another 5 miles eastward toward rural roads leading to Holt's Summit. Mounted police units assisted on dirt tracks, while civilian volunteers checked drainage ditches. A few locals reported hearing a loud engine and seeing vehicle lights near the old dock on the night of September 12, but too much time had passed for anyone to recall direction accurately. All information was added to the master map, now dense with red dots. By day's end, divers completed a drag from the north bank to the south, results negative. No body, no additional personal items beyond the handkerchief. Darnell stood on the riverbank, watching the muddy current rush past, the handkerchief in its evidence bag, a faint reminder of the missing woman. His interim report concluded, E2, handkerchief confirmed as victim's property. Missouri Riverside area considered location of last recovered evidence, but insufficient to establish primary scene. Continue expanded search within 15-mile radius of Fulton for next 72 hours. The report was signed at 19:05 on September 19, 1979, marking the end of the first phase of the Eleanor Price search operation. Results: no body recovered, but the first piece of direct physical evidence possibly linked to her mysterious disappearance. After the search was suspended, evidence item E2, the handkerchief embroidered EP, was personally delivered by Sergeant James Darnell to the Missouri State Forensic Laboratory in Columbia. The transfer file included photographs, a site diagram, and the sealing record. On September 20, 1979, the lab's chief technician, Charles Merritt, received it and began analysis. The lab was housed in a low, aging building thick with the smell of chemicals and developing solutions. Merritt and 2 assistants placed the handkerchief on a stainless steel table under high-intensity lights. The item was heavy with moisture, mud caked thickly around the edges and the embroidered corner. They photographed the entire surface in close-up details of the stitching and soiled areas. It was then dried in a fume hood for 3 hours to prevent mold, then divided, 1 portion for chemical testing, 1 preserved as archive. Merritt gently scraped the mud into a vial labeled E2A soil sample and cut a 1 by 1 centimeters fabric square from the edge, labeled E2B fiber. In his notes, he described the fiber as cotton nylon blend, common in late 1970s domestic goods, supporting likelihood of local purchase. The mud was diluted and examined microscopically, revealing primarily clay alluvial soil mixed with fine sand and aquatic plant fragments. Merritt compared it to the Riverside sample Darnell submitted E1A and found mineral structure and silt ratios consistent. He concluded, geological origin matches Missouri River bank south of Fulton. The finding was handwritten in the lab log and signed on September 22. Additionally, the team tested for organic traces or blood, but prolonged exposure to moisture and the elements yielded negative results. Merritt noted that in 1979 DNA technology did not exist. Only fresh samples allowed blood typing or basic protein identification. Here the handkerchief had been in rain and mud for at least 2 days, all enzymes destroyed. Report entry: no biological traces detected, no hair or foreign fibers. However, 1 corner showed significantly heavier mud accumulation, suggesting the item had been dragged or dropped onto wet ground before being buried in silt. Merritt circled that area in red on the photos with the note possible impact side. Darnell received the preliminary report on the morning of September 23 and filed it in case 7947. He also requested comparison of the mud with samples from the motel room and rear exit. Results showed clear differences. Motel mud had lower clay content, confirming the handkerchief originated elsewhere and supporting the theory it was dropped at the riverside, not the motel. Merritt's team photographed the entire item on Kodak 35mm film, producing 6 prints, overall view, embroidery detail, mud coverage, and heavy soiled corner. Prints were developed and pasted into forensic record #E2, Eleanor Price case. Originals were stored in the cold evidence vault at 45 degrees Fahrenheit, alongside soil and fiber vials. A copy was sent to Darnell in Fulton, with a summary, handkerchief embroidered EP. Recovered Missouri Riverside. Soil matches regional geology. No biological traces or fingerprints detected. Item dried and fully sealed. Darnell read every line, feeling both progress and another dead end. The handkerchief proved Eleanor had been near the river, but revealed nothing about why or with whom. All samples and photographs were archived at the Central Columbia Forensic Lab, with negative film copies requested for the Fulton Police Department for future reports. The evidence transfer form was completed at 16:35 on September 23, 1979, closing the first forensic phase of the Eleanor Price disappearance investigation. After the evidence examination phase at Columbia was completed, Sergeant James Darnell returned to the Fulton office with a case file more than 200 pages thick, containing technical reports, witness statements, and crime scene photographs. He spent the entire day of September 24, 1979, reviewing all the data and synthesizing hypotheses. On the whiteboard in his office, Darnell wrote 3 possible scenarios: 1. Voluntary departure. 2. Accident. 3. Abduction or third-party involvement. In the first column, he listed every factor related to the possibility that Eleanor Price had left voluntarily: single lifestyle, few friends, possible work, or psychological pressure. But directly beneath that line, he underlined in red, no signs of preparation, no withdrawals, no packed belongings. The bank account was untouched. The personal vehicle left behind, essential items all present. No letters, notes, or messages. No evidence she intended to leave. He moved to the second column, accident. The possibility that Eleanor had met with an accident after leaving the diner or on the way back to the motel was considered, but searches along Route 54, the woods, and the riverbank turned up no body, tire tracks, or signs of impact. The dive team report confirmed no suspicious submerged objects. The only physical evidence was the embroidered handkerchief marked EP, an item that could have been dropped in many different scenarios. He added the note, accident, undetermined, no clear signs. The third column was the abduction hypothesis. Darnell reviewed witness statements about the gray pickup truck and the man in the green jacket seen around the time Eleanor disappeared. The description matched in at least 3 independent statements: tall, thin build, baseball cap, small silver-gray box truck. That was the only element suggesting third-party presence. He placed evidence photo, E1, the muddy footprint, next to the lab report copy, men's size 27, 28, US 9, 10, 3 horizontal grooves, matching the type of work boot Jerry Lawson wore. But the similarity was not enough for a conclusion, since hundreds of men in the area owned the same model. Lawson's alibi still had a 30-minute gap, but there was no evidence he had ever left the motel. No witness saw Eleanor being forced. No signs of struggle in her room or car. The 3 hypotheses sat side by side, none dominant. Darnell felt every piece of information stood alone, unable to form a coherent chain. He spent the afternoon writing the summary report. Hypothesis 1, voluntary departure, low probability. Hypothesis 2, accident, no physical evidence. Hypothesis 3, abduction, suspicious indicators present, but no specific elements constituting a crime. The report also highlighted the bottlenecks: lack of direct witnesses, no recording devices, limited forensic technology, no biological results from evidence. At the end, he recommended expanding the investigation to the state level. That evening, at Fulton headquarters, Darnell held a short meeting with the police chief and the Callaway County prosecutor's office representative. The meeting took place under dim light, with the Route 54 map spread across the table. He presented each scenario, pointing out strengths and weaknesses. The chief concluded, "There is no conclusive evidence for any hypothesis. We are dealing with a disappearance without a trace." The minutes were signed, and the decision was made to transfer the entire file to the Missouri State Highway Patrol's Investigative Bureau, MIB, in Jefferson City, for analytical support. On September 26, Darnell packaged all the evidence, copies of photographs, soil samples, footprint casts, lab reports, and witness statements, sealed in 2 file boxes, and sent by official vehicle. In the handover record, he wrote, "File status, insufficient basis to determine cause or criminal act. Requests additional analysis and overall assessment at state level." For Darnell, the Eleanor Price case was a paradox. Every detail was concrete, yet the whole was empty. She had been seen, mentioned, left evidence, but no trail. He looked again at the last line of his report. Eleanor Price, missing September 12, 1979, hypothesis open. The next morning, File 7947 was officially transferred to the Missouri Investigative Bureau, becoming one of the few cases from that era elevated to state level due to its unusual nature and lack of conclusive evidence. After the Eleanor Price missing person file was transferred to the Missouri Investigative Bureau, MIB specialists conducted a complete review of all documents, physical evidence, and statements collected by Sergeant James Darnell and the Fulton team. For nearly 2 years, from late 1979 through the end of 1980, File 7947 was reviewed quarterly, but no new discoveries were made. All submitted samples yielded the same results: no blood, no identifying marks, no usable biological material. Search maps became covered in meaningless red pins, and Route 54, once considered the key, returned to silence as if nothing had ever happened. Darnell stayed in contact with the State Bureau, but replies grew shorter. No new developments, insufficient data to expand investigation, no new subjects. In February 1981, MIB sent formal notice to the Fulton Police Department. The missing person case of Eleanor Price is suspended pending new evidence or witnesses. The decision to close the file was signed by the State Investigation Director on March 12, 1981, receiving a new designation in the cold case system. Cold file #47. Missing person, Eleanor Price. The case was officially placed in Missouri's unsolved inventory. Sergeant Darnell had by then transferred to the Economic Crimes Unit, but he attended the final evidence handover. The handkerchief-coated E2 soil vials, crime scene photos, and all records were resealed and placed in 2 metal boxes labeled Fulton 7947. Originals were stored at the Central Columbia Forensic Lab Vault, copies at MIB Jefferson City. Original Kodak negatives and Darnell's handwritten notebooks were clipped in numbered folders 1 through 36. He signed the final handover with the brief note, "No conclusion." In the field, the Fulton team removed marking stakes around Route 54 and the Missouri riverbank. Detailed maps once hung in the investigation room were rolled up and sent to storage. Jerry Lawson, the only potential suspect, was interviewed one last time in April 1981. He reaffirmed his original statement and provided documentation of a new job in Kansas City. After checks found no further links, Darnell wrote "clear" next to Lawson's name on the suspect list. A few months later, Lawson left Missouri. His residency records transferred to Kansas, where he continued work as a construction engineer. No further mentions of him appear in state criminal files. In Fulton, life returned to normal. Room 7 at Lakeview Inn was cleaned and re-rented. The faded seal on the doorframe disappeared. The town police kept only one copy of Darnell's 12-page summary report covering the entire investigation from September 13, 1979 to March 12, 1981. With the final conclusion, no evidence determining a criminal event, victim status unknown. When the box was placed in Missouri State Storage, an archivist entered in the ledger, file #47. Eleanor Price, Fulton 1979, missing. The case was officially closed, not declared solved, simply silent among hundreds of other 1970s files on cold metal shelves. After Eleanor Price's file was designated cold file #47 in March 1981, the disappearance gradually faded from the town of Fulton's memory. For the next 4 decades, The nearly 200-page dossier lay untouched in Missouri State Archives, in the basement of the Columbia Forensic Lab, where hundreds of unresolved cases were neatly arranged on numbered metal shelves. The metal box labeled Fulton 7947 gathered a thin layer of dust, its paper seal still intact, the corner bearing the faded words, "Property of MIB." No one mentioned Eleanor's name again, except the occasional young officer who stumbled across it in the archive index. James Darnell retired in the mid-1990s and lived quietly on the outskirts of Columbia. Jerry Lawson, once the only potential suspect, had left the state long ago, his whereabouts unknown. Reports, evidence, and original photographs remained under secure storage, but no one ever requested a review. In the 1990s and early 2000s, identification and biological testing technology advanced dramatically, yet old Missouri missing person cases remained low priority because there was no DNA or biological material to test. Every decade, the archives performed inventory and noted no update in the file status. The handkerchief-coated E2 and soil vials, E1A, were kept in a dedicated cold storage unit at a steady 45 degrees Fahrenheit, with packaging replaced annually. Darnell's photographs and handwritten notes began to fade, but remained legible. In Fulton, Lakeview Inn changed owners twice. Room 7 was renovated, leaving no trace of the 1979 events. By the mid-2010s, Missouri began a project to digitize pre-1990 cold case files to create an electronic database of unsolved cases. In April 2018, the program was officially approved by the State Investigative Bureau. The Columbia Forensic Lab archive team was tasked with selecting, scanning, and cataloging old files that could potentially match modern data. Among the first batch of 127 files, in position 47, was Fulton 7947, the disappearance of Eleanor Price. After nearly 40 years frozen in storage, it was brought back to investigators' desks for the first time since 1981. The metal box was opened under the white light of the technical room, and inside, the handkerchief-embroidered EP remained perfectly preserved, its blue thread faded but intact, becoming the first piece of evidence digitally scanned in Missouri's 2018 cold case project. File Fulton 7947. Once removed from storage under the 2018 Missouri Cold Case Digitization Program, was assigned to 41-year-old investigator Sarah Duvall of the Missouri Investigative Bureau's Special Investigations Unit. Duvall specialized in long-dormant cases and had successfully reopened two 1980s cases using modern DNA analysis. On May 9, 2018, she signed the receipt for cold file hash 47, Eleanor Price. The old metal box was brought into MIB's secure archive room in Jefferson City and placed on examination table hash 3 under even white lighting. Duvall carefully removed the yellowed paper seal, wearing latex gloves, and lifted the lid. Everything inside remained in original order. Thick case folder, 1979. 1981 lab reports, hand-developed film photographs, search maps, witness statements, and 2 sealed evidence bags labeled E1, footprint, and E2, handkerchief. At the bottom were 3 small glass vials of soil labeled E1A and 2 nylon bags containing fibers and hairs collected from the motel room. In 1979, catalogued E09, fiber hair evidence. Darnell had noted only collected from pillow in room 7, not tested. Duvall sat silently for several minutes, looking at the faded handwriting, then began reviewing each document in sequence. The crime scene photos were still sharp. The small motel room, wooden table, half-drawn curtain, muddy footprint near the back door. She noted, evidence intact, no degradation observed. Next, she closely examined the 1979 Columbia Lab report. At that time, DNA technology did not exist, so analysis was limited to mechanical tests of fiber type, soil composition, and basic traces. In the final appendix, she discovered a line written in blue ink, hair and fiber samples not analyzed due to lack of spectroscopic equipment. She circled it in red, then turned to the last page where Darnell had written, "Hold for future testing," a detail overlooked for nearly 40 years. Duvall immediately listed the evidence items still viable for testing. Hair sample E09, pillow fibers, and remaining fabric from handkerchief E2. She added, possible root cell or follicular DNA present, suitable for comparison with current databases. While rechecking the evidence inventory, she confirmed all samples remained in original sealed condition, seal numbers matching Columbia Forensic Lab records, with no signs of tampering. She contacted Columbia Forensic Lab, the same facility that handled the original case, now equipped with modern DNA capabilities, and requested retesting under new forensic protocols. That afternoon, Duvall submitted an internal MIB request DNA analysis on cold file hash, 47 samples, hair fiber evidence E09, and handkerchief E2. Comparison with National CODIS database. Once approved, she personally resealed the evidence bags in a new preservation box, noted the time 1745 on May 9, 2018, signed, and transported them by secure vehicle to Columbia. En route, she reread Darnell's original report, the predecessor she had heard about in training courses. His meticulous documentation made her feel as though she were walking in the footsteps of an investigator from a previous era, except now she held technology he could not have imagined in 1979. Upon arrival at Columbia Forensic Lab, Duvall handed the evidence to current Chief Technician Dr. Douglas Kearney, a DNA specialist with over 20 years' experience. He verified seal integrity, confirmed condition, and signed receipt. Duvall emphasized, "We only need one viable cell from the hair or fabric. Any trace could rewrite this entire file." Kearney promised cold preservation protocol and microscopic analysis within 10 days. As she left the lab, Duvall paused in the hallway, looking through the glass at the handkerchief embroidered EP lying under bright white light, awaiting sampling. After 40 years, that once faint clue had again become the center of the investigation, offering the first real chance to uncover the truth about Eleanor Price's disappearance. Columbia Forensic Lab began DNA analysis of cold file hash 47 on May 11, 2018, supervised by Dr. Douglas Kearney and his molecular biology team. Samples were opened in a positive pressure sterile chamber at 18 degrees Celsius. The 1,979 sealed nylon bag coded E09 fiber cere was cut at one corner to extract 3 hairs, one with intact root, 2 broken midshaft. Under electron microscope, Kearney confirmed the rooted hair retained epithelial cells sufficient for mitochondrial DNA extraction. He noted, hair likely belongs to individual sharing the room or the victim herself, requires comparison with personal effects if available. Additionally, a small fabric section from the motel pillow was taken for skin cell testing. Samples were processed using legacy DNA protocol, amplifying HV1 and HV2 regions of mitochondrial DNA, the standard method for decades-old evidence. After 2 days of incubation, results yielded a complete 16,569 base mitochondrial sequence, an unusually well-preserved specimen for evidence nearly 40 years old. Kearney called investigator Sarah Duvall on the morning of May 14, "We have the sequence. Female DNA, consistent with adult age." Duvall arrived that afternoon, signed for the newly coded sample hash E09MT79, and uploaded the data to CODIS, the U.S. National DNA Database. 3 days later, the result returned, no match with any criminal, missing person or relative profile. The automated report noted, no match mitochondrial DNA not linked to existing entries. Duvall knew the conventional path was closed, but another avenue had recently opened in many states, public genetic genealogy tool GEDmatch, which allowed comparison against voluntarily uploaded consumer DNA data. After completing internal legal requirements, on May 20th, The E09 sample was uploaded to GED Match as a 22-chromosome sequence coded. Subject EP 1979. Processing took nearly 2 days. On the morning of May 22, Duvall received notification, potential relative match found, shared DNA 48 cm, 0.7%. The match was with a user listed as MK Minnesota, sharing 48 centimorgans, equivalent to a third or fourth degree relative. Duvall contacted MIB's contracted genealogy team, led by forensic anthropologist Emily Carver, to begin building the family tree. Carver uploaded the raw E09 data to Family Tree DNA and analyzed matching segments. After 3 days reviewing birth, residency, and marriage records in Minnesota, she identified a lineage, starting with a couple in Winona County in the 1940s, who had 4 children that migrated to various states. The second branch settled in Missouri in the early 1960s. They carried the surname Lawson. Carver's preliminary report to Duvall stated, match with Lawson family Missouri migration branch coincides with birth year 1941 of Jerry Lawson, construction engineer. Duvall stopped reading at that line. She remembered the name from Darnell's 1979 file, marked as the sole potential suspect but never charged. She immediately requested verification to rule out error. Carver replied hours later, genealogy linkage based on mitochondrial and autosomal DNA, 98.4% confidence, can only belong to Lawson maternal line. Duvall reopened the old photos, the note Jerry Lawson, room 9, Fulton Inn, 1979 was still clear. She understood the DNA match did not prove a crime, but it established that the hair collected from the motel room in 1979 was biologically linked to the Lawson family, meaning it came from Jerry Lawson himself or a close maternal relative. She called Dr. Turney for nuclear and mitochondrial confirmation. He replied, "We extracted both profiles. Nuclear DNA confirms male individual, mitochondrial sequence matches the E09 Lawson maternal line, cannot belong to Eleanor." That statement changed everything. Duvall requested a formal report and uploaded the data to the MIB system. In the preliminary conclusion dated May 25, 2018, Kearney wrote, nuclear DNA, male mitochondrial DNA, matches Lawson lineage. Probability 145,000. Duvall read each line carefully, then wrote in her own notebook. After 39 years, evidence item E09 for the first time shows biological presence of a male connected to the Lawson family. Sample E09 was returned to refrigerated storage, microscopic images, and sequence data uploaded to MIB's internal database. That same day, Duvall submitted her preliminary report to the State Investigation Director under the single heading, Cold File #47. Eleanor Price, genetic link established. Immediately after the DNA results established a genealogical connection to the Lawson family line, investigator Sarah Duvall decided to re-examine all non-biological evidence in the case, particularly the mud shoe print labeled E1, the only footwear impression ever documented at the crime scene in room 7 of the motel in 1979. In the original file, the print had only been photographed with a Polaroid camera and given a cursory description, 3 horizontal grooves, rubber sole, size 27, 28, common pattern. There were no negatives or precise measurement prints because the technology for digital image extraction did not exist at the time. On May 28, 2018, Duvall contacted the MIB Digital Forensics Unit to rescan all the Polaroid photos using a high-resolution 2400 DPI scanner and convert them to TIFF digital files. Under lab lighting, the old photo revealed more detail, dark mud streaks, a deeply impressed heel, a blurred toe area from sinking into the mud, but the tread pattern was still recognizable. 3 parallel horizontal grooves with a faint oval logo in the center. Duvall enlarged the image 400%, adjusted the contrast, and sent it to automated footwear analyst Dr. Martin Kersey, who oversaw the FBI Red Wing Shoes Joint Sole Match software program. The database contained over 100,000 sole patterns of shoes manufactured in the United States between 1950 and 1990, categorized by style, release year, and groove specifications. The E1 image data was uploaded and switched to pattern analysis mode. 3 hours later, Kersey returned the results, matching candidate, Red Wing 877, model year 1978, size 10, 11. Match rate 93%. The attached report explained that the Red Wing 877 was a brown leather high-top work boot designed for civil engineers and mechanics, extremely popular in the Midwest in the late 1970s. Its sole featured the distinctive 3 horizontal grooves and an oval logo at the heel, matching the Polaroid image exactly. Duvall cross-referenced the old case file. Jerry Lawson had stated he wore construction safety boots while in Fulton, but the brand was never recorded. The 1979 seizure report of his footwear described thick rubber soles, brown, Red Wing style or equivalent. Darnell had noted, possible match to E1, but insufficient for conclusion. Duvall decided to verify further. She went to the MIB's old evidence warehouse, where some items had been retained for training purposes. After 2 days of searching, the technician located one sealed pair of men's work boots, tagged since 1981, as Lawson exhibit. Duvall immediately requested it be opened. Beneath thick dust lay a pair of dark brown Red Wing 877 boots, laces frayed, soles unevenly worn. She photographed them in detail and measured the length at 30.2 centimeters compared to the E1 print length of 29.8 seam, a difference of only 0.4 centimeters within acceptable tolerance. The sole had 3 horizontal grooves and the oval logo, exactly matching the 1978 pattern. Kersey used a 3D scanner to reconstruct the tread and digitally overlaid it onto the original Polaroid. When the software finished, the match rate displayed 93%, with a margin of error of 1.2 mm. The final report stated, shoe print E1 and Red Wing 877 exhibit high similarity in pattern size and groove structure. Statistical match 93%, 2%. Duvall added the data to cold file hash 47 under footwear evidence. In her comments she wrote, in 1979, no quantitative matching tools existed. Based on current digital comparison modeling, E1 can now be confirmed as highly likely from a Red Wing 877 boot, the same type owned by Lawson. She printed the analysis, attached it to the file, and added the note, E1 confirmed Red Wing 877 size 10, 11, 93% match. The report was sent upstairs the same day. This strengthened the hypothesis that the person wearing those boots had been inside the motel room the night Eleanor disappeared. Still cautious, Duvall added a handwritten note, does not confirm identity of the person who left the print, must be combined with DNA data. That same day she updated the suspect profile, Jerry Lawson. Profession engineer, footwear Red Wing 877, registered 1978 purchase, last known Kansas City, Kansas. The old records were fed into the federal population tracking system to locate Lawson's current whereabouts. Initial results showed he had changed jobs multiple times in the 1990s and retired in 2009 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the same region where distant DNA relatives had been found on GED match. Duvall read the results and circled 2 words on the whiteboard, Lawson, Minnesota. She knew every detail was finally falling into place after nearly 40 years, starting with an old muddy footprint that modern technology had now restored millimeter by millimeter, and the name of its former owner had once again resurfaced in a file that had gathered dust for 4 decades. After the footwear analysis showed a high probability match with the Red Wing 877 boots Jerry Lawson had owned, investigator Sarah Duvall shifted the investigation to verifying Lawson's complete employment history and activities during the period he lived in Fulton in 1979. On May 30, 2018, she contacted the Missouri Department of Labor to search the employment records of Midwest Infrastructure, the company that had handled the Fulton Dam renovation, the largest project in Callaway County, in the late 1970s. After 2 days, the archives provided a microfilm copy of the contract signed between Jerry Lawson and Midwest Infrastructure on June 18, 1979, for the position of site engineer, 6-month duration. A handwritten HR note read, "Contract terminated early October 1979. Employee voluntarily resigned. Reason personal matters." Duvall compared the dates to Eleanor Price's mid-September disappearance and saw an almost perfect temporal overlap. She requested a copy of the full employee roster for the Fulton Dam project, summer 1979. 42 individuals in total. 3 were still alive and living in Missouri. They were asked to cooperate. On June 3, Duvall visited former worker Harold Finnegan, age 67, who had been a foreman. He remembered Lawson clearly. Jerry was quiet, kept to himself, but precise in his work, and often stayed late at the site. Sometimes he arrived before the morning shift to review plans while it was still dark. When asked about mid-September 1979, Finnegan paused and said, "I remember because it rained hard that day. Lawson didn't show up in the morning, said he was sick. But he came in the afternoon covered in mud, boots soaked. I joked, 'You look like you just waded across the river,' and he just smiled, didn't say anything." Duvall recorded the statement and highlighted "covered in mud" in her notebook. Regarding Lawson's October resignation, Finnegan said no one knew the real reason. He suddenly handed in his notice, said he was transferring north, didn't say goodbye to anyone. "We just saw him pack up one evening." This matched Midwest Infrastructure HR records, confirming Lawson submitted his resignation on October 5, 1979, 23 days after Eleanor vanished, and was paid through the end of the month. Duvall located 2 more witnesses, materials engineer Daniel Cruz, now in Columbia, and former administrative clerk Carol Denton. Both recalled Lawson as antisocial, always ate alone, and always left the site through the south exit instead of the main gate. Cruz added a crucial detail. Early September, Jerry kept asking for directions to the riverbank, saying he needed to survey the geology for a report, but that wasn't part of his assignment. Denton remembered him coming to the office after hours to make long-distance calls, sounding tense and never giving the name of the person he was calling. Duvall compared all statements with the route Darnell had mapped in 1979. The last area Eleanor was seen lay directly south of the Fulton Dam site, the same path Lawson regularly took after his shift. On June 6, Duvall requested the technical maps of Fulton Dam from the State Construction Archives to identify Lawson's assigned sector. The plans showed he was responsible for the auxiliary pump system, located right on the Missouri riverbank, only about 2 miles from where the handkerchief E2 was found. A note in the construction file read, "Engineer Lawson authorized to access maintenance road, key issued June 9, 79. That meant Lawson was one of the few people allowed to use the private road that led straight down to the river, an area off-limits to others at night. Duvall stared at the line for a long time, then wrote in her notebook, "Authorized river access, matches location of E2 discovery." She continued reviewing Lawson's resignation file, a short handwritten letter to the Midwest director, stating, "Thank you for the opportunity. Due to family reasons, I resign effective October 8, 1979. No forwarding address, just the slanted signature, Jerry L., that matched the one on his Lakeview Inn rental form. Duvall photographed everything and coded it. M79 Lawson Records. At the end of the day she compiled a report. Lawson employed at Fulton Dam, 6/79, 10/79, resigned 3 weeks after disappearance, had authorized access to river area where E2 was recovered. Witness Finnegan confirmed subject appeared, covered in mud on the day of the disappearance. Maps and personnel extracts were attached. In the interim conclusion, she wrote, "Employment data strengthens Lawson's presence in the potential crime scene area during the victim's disappearance window." Footwear matches Red Wing 877, issued to site engineers that year. Independent witnesses confirm unusual behavior within the matching time frame. She signed the 12-page report, stamped it MIB Cold Case Unit, and filed it. An old employment file had just become a new piece of a 40-year-old puzzle. After confirming Jerry Lawson worked at Fulton Dam at the exact time Eleanor Price vanished and had authorized access to the Missouri riverbank area where evidence was found, investigator Sarah Duvall submitted a formal report to the director of the Missouri Bureau of Investigation requesting coordination with Minnesota law enforcement for covert surveillance of the subject. Demographic records showed Lawson was now 67, retired, living in Bloomington, a suburb of Minneapolis. He was registered as a part-time engineering consultant for a small construction firm, lived with his wife and adult son, had no criminal record, a clean civil history, and was regarded by the community as an exemplary citizen. Nevertheless, the genealogical DNA hit and the footwear evidence in Fulton 7947 made him the primary focus. On June 10, 2018, under an interstate agreement, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, BCA, assigned a task force to monitor Lawson for 30 days, concentrating on collecting discarded DNA samples. The team was led by Inspector Mark Holden and included 2 undercover investigators. Holden's first operational report noted, subject maintains regular routine, wakes at 7 a.m., walks, gets coffee at Miller's Brew, 0.8 miles away, afternoons at the Retired Engineers Club, evenings at home. They installed cameras along his usual routes and logged every stop. On June 14th, Lawson attended a local hockey game. After leaving the stands, he discarded a used tissue in a trash can near the gate. An agent recovered it within 5 minutes, sealed it in a nylon evidence bag labeled Specimen JL, MN, 0614. 2 days later at Miller's Brew, he finished a cappuccino, read the paper, and left the paper cup and plastic straw behind. The surveillance team collected both, labeled Specimen JL, MN, 0616. All items were sent to the BCA lab in St. Paul for forensic DNA extraction. Preliminary results confirmed clear male DNA, suitable for comparison. The genetic data was encrypted and forwarded to Columbia Forensic Lab, where the mitochondrial and nuclear DNA from evidence item E09 was stored. On June 20th, Dr. Douglas Kearney received the comparison samples and ran parallel testing against the hair and fabric DNA from Eleanor Price's file. The analysis used autosomal STR sequencing across 21 characteristic loci. When the analyzer finished, the screen displayed 21 21st loci, identical between E09MT79 and JL, MN 0614. The report printed that afternoon carried the bold conclusion, full nuclear DNA match, probability 99.9997%. Kearney called Duvall in Jefferson City directly. Sarah, there's no doubt left. The DNA on the hair recovered from the 1979 motel pillowcase is Jerry Lawson's. Duvall was silent for a few seconds, then asked him to prepare the official report, co-signed by 2 witnesses, with an electronic copy archived in the MIB system. She knew this moment marked the turning point after nearly 4 decades of a frozen case. The same day she asked BCA Minnesota to maintain surveillance but avoid direct contact to protect the investigation. Holden's team continued observation. Lawson's routine remained unchanged. No signs of anxiety or awareness of being watched. During the 3rd week they collected an additional water bottle and a newspaper bearing his fingerprints. Secondary DNA results also matched. Duvall compiled everything and submitted the final report to the MIB director on June 25, 2018. It contained 3 sections, 1 Columbia Lab DNA, results, 100% match between Lawson and E09. 2 Description of the surveillance operation and lawful collection of discarded DNA in Minnesota. 3 Recommendation to proceed with criminal investigation and gather additional evidence for search warrant application. In the final note she wrote, Jerry Lawson, direct biological link to evidence recovered at Eleanor Price, 1979 disappearance scene. Recommend continued federal-level surveillance in preparation of prosecution file. That night, Duvall sat alone in the MIB office rereading Darnell's old note. Lawson, potential suspect. Insufficient evidence. Nearly 40 years later, that sentence had finally been completed by science that could not be disputed. The final DNA comparison report was officially delivered from Columbia Lab to MIB headquarters in Jefferson City on the morning of June 26, 2018. The 12-page document, signed by Dr. Douglas Kearney and 2 independent analysts, confirmed Jerry Lawson's DNA matched 100% with the biological evidence collected at Eleanor Price's 1979 disappearance scene. The conclusion read, match probability 99.9997%. Genetic profile identical across 21 STR loci. Attached were comparison charts and electropherograms. No doubt remained. Sarah Duvall read every line slowly, pausing at the note, source, hair strand recovered from pillowcase, Lakeview Inn, room #7. Lawson's DNA had been on the pillow in the last room where Eleanor was seen alive. Silence filled the office as she closed the file. Knowing a case once considered closed had just been reopened for good, Duvall immediately presented the report to the MIB director and requested an emergency search warrant for Lawson's residence in Bloomington, Minnesota. During the morning briefing, members of the Cold Case Unit, BCA Minnesota representatives, and the Callaway County prosecutor attended. Duvall summarized, evidence DNA collected in 1979, retested with modern STR technology, shows an absolute match with Lawson. Discarded samples were lawfully obtained. We have probable cause that he was present at the scene. After legal review, the Missouri chief prosecutor approved the warrant application to the federal court in Minneapolis, requesting search of Lawson's home and vehicles. On June 28, U.S. District Judge John M. Harlow signed the warrant covering the private residence at 2148 Fremont Drive, Bloomington, a detached garage, and a 2008 Ford pickup truck. The warrant was valid for 7 days and would be executed jointly by BCA and local police under MIB oversight. At noon that day, Inspector Mark Holden's task force finalized the operational plan. 2 investigators for biological collection, a digital forensics team for electronic devices, and a perimeter security detail. Duvall flew to Minneapolis that night, carrying the original warrant and all case files. At 6 o'clock a.m. on June 29th, the team assembled in front of Lawson's 2-story gray wooden house. The neighborhood was quiet. Neighbors were out walking, unaware of what was about to happen. When police knocked, Lawson opened the door wearing a plaid shirt, looking stunned. Holden served the warrant and read the terms aloud. Lawson did not resist, simply nodded and let them in. While one officer recorded the entire procedure on video, Duvall entered Lawson's small office filled with engineering drawings, work notebooks, and Missouri geological maps, one yellowed note reading, Fulton Dam, pump station soil type. She ordered all related documents, sealed and collected personal items for backup DNA comparison, toothbrush, comb, razor, jackets. In the basement, forensics located 2 plastic bins of old paperwork, including copies of Midwest infrastructure contracts and several photographs of the 1979 Fulton Dam site. One photo showed Lawson standing near the riverbank beside a work truck, his Red Wing 877 boots clearly caked in mud. Duvall recognized the detail instantly and had the photo separated as new evidence, E19, Fulton Dam photo. Additionally, in a small wooden cabinet in the corner, officers found a cloth bag containing numerous old Polaroid pictures, some of the Fulton Lake area, several blurry images of a woman whose identity was not yet clear. Everything was sealed and individually labeled. When collection was complete, Holden prepared the inventory, secured the containers with evidence tape, and transported everything to BCA St. Paul for analysis. Lawson remained calm throughout, only asking, Does this have to do with something from 40 years ago? Duvall did not answer directly, saying only, "We need to clarify a 1979 case in Fulton." The team departed at 10 a.m. with 2 boxes of physical evidence, 4 electronic devices, and old maps. Holden's preliminary report noted, "No weapons or dangerous items found, but numerous documents and photographs related to Fulton Dam project recovered. Digital forensic examination recommended." Duvall returned to BCA headquarters that afternoon to hand over all files and samples. In her internal MIB memo she wrote, "Lawson DNA absolute match to 1979 evidence. Search warrant executed." Recovered documents and photographs confirm Lawson's presence on the Missouri riverbank at the exact time of the disappearance. This was the breakthrough Sergeant Darnell had sought 40 years earlier, but lacked the technology to prove. Now, with DNA and photographs, the connection was undeniable. Immediately after the search warrant was executed, and the preliminary evidence was transferred to the BCA St. Paul laboratory. The federal investigative team, in coordination with the Missouri MIB, returned to Jerry Lawson's house for a second time on the morning of June 30, 2018, to conduct a more detailed search. This time they focused on the basement and the detached garage in the back, areas previously noted in the report as having a musty odor and dried mud marks on the cement floor. Sarah Duvall, along with Inspector Mark Holden, personally supervised the operation, accompanied by 2 forensic technicians specializing in geological and material analysis. The basement was small, dimly lit and dusty, but in one corner stood an old metal cabinet locked with a master lock number 45 padlock. Lawson provided the key when asked. When it was opened, inside was an old cardboard box, sealed with brown packing tape. Written on the lid in black marker were the words, "Tools, 1979. Duvall signaled the technician to break the seal. Inside, mixed together, were several items, a heavily worn pair of Red Wing 877 boots, with one lace broken and unevenly worn soles. A large, faded map, labeled Missouri River Basin, Fulton Dam Section. A crumpled envelope sealed with a Midwest Infrastructure, personnel stamp, and one item that made the entire team freeze for several seconds. A Missouri State ID card, clearly bearing the name Eleanor Price, with a blurred photo and dried mud stuck to one corner. Duvall immediately ordered all activity stopped, detailed photographs taken of the scene, and each item individually sealed. The temporary report noted, seized original ID card in the name of victim Eleanor Price, age condition, bearing alluvial mud residue, stored in suspect's personal box. She knew this was the most valuable evidence found since the case was reopened. The Red Wing 877 boots were placed separately into an evidence bag labeled E20 footwear. When measured, the sole length was 30.1 centimeters, the tread pattern an exact match for the 1978 Red Wing model, featuring 3 transverse grooves and a faint oval logo. Initial microscopic examination revealed hardened reddish-brown soil still lodged in the tread grooves. Duvall ordered scraping samples taken and labeled sample E20A. The on-site geologist examined them and commented, "Alluvial clay-rich soil, consistent with Missouri River sedimentary layers." This preliminary finding was recorded, pending full lab comparison. Continuing through the box, they discovered a stack of faded photocopied documents containing Fulton Dam pumping station blueprints, with red pen markings around the area labeled Maintenance Road, Restricted Access. Duvall recognized it instantly as the road leading down to the riverbank, where, in 1979, search teams had recovered the monogrammed handkerchief marked EP. The map was sealed under code E21. Map of Fulton Dam 1979. The examination lasted 3 days. The soil from Lawson's boot was finely ground and examined under a polarizing microscope for mineral composition. Results showed Montmorillonite 46%, illite 28%, kaolinite 10%, quartz 9%, and amorphous clay, 7%, a signature profile found only in the South. Fulton sedimentary band at the confluence of the Missouri River and Cedar Creek. Control sample, Fe3, taken from that exact location, produced nearly identical mineralogy. Montmorillonite, 47%. Illite, 27%. Quartz, 9%, with a 0.3% margin of error. The report concluded mineral structure, color, and particle ratios of sample E20A are fully consistent with control F3. Probability of common origin, 99%. Additionally, strontium-87-86 isotope analysis yielded virtually identical ratios, proving the mud on Lawson's boot sole originated from the south bank of the Missouri River, near Fulton, just over 2 miles from Eleanor Price's disappearance site. Duvall read the report in the Columbia lab, feeling the entire chain of evidence closing into a perfect circle, matching DNA, identical boot type, soil pinpointing the exact location. The only missing piece was determining the precise spot where Lawson had stopped on the night of September 12, 1979. Together with Dr. Coyle and 2 geological technicians, she created a reconstructed terrain map of the South Fulton Riverbank using historical USGS satellite imagery. The map showed that before the Fulton Dam was completed, a nearly 3-mile maintenance trail had led down to the water intake, an area Lawson had authorized access to as an engineer. 40 years later, the trail was buried and hidden by overgrowth, but the alluvial stratigraphy remained intact. Coyle pointed to the map and said simply, "If anything is buried, it will be along this slope where the clay holds water best." Duvall understood immediately that was the area to search. On July 8, she submitted the geological summary and a formal request to the Missouri State Prosecutor's Office for a limited exploratory excavation warrant at South Fulton. Coordinates 38°50, N 91°56, W, on land managed by the State Department of Natural Resources. The application clearly stated the scientific basis: samples E20A and E22, recovered from suspects' footwear, and residents fully match South Bank Missouri River soil. Mineral, isotopic, and location data align with the area where evidence item E2 was recovered. Request court permission for limited excavation to locate related evidence or remains. On July 9, the Callaway County judge approved the excavation warrant, authorizing a 200-square-meter search along the riverbank, maximum depth 3 meters, to be completed within 7 days. The warrant was regarded as the most significant step since the case reopened, shifting from indirect investigation to actual field excavation. When Duvall signed for the order, she stared silently at the red approved stamp, sensing a clear link between 2 generations of investigators from Sergeant Darnell in 1979, who had stood powerless before rain and mud, to herself now, retracing the same path with technology and evidence. The dried mud on those Red Wing boots was not merely residue from a night of disappearance. It was a geological piece proving a truth buried for 4 decades. On the morning of July 12, 2018, the joint MIB and Missouri Department of Natural Resources Special Excavation Team arrived at the south bank of the Missouri River at the coordinates specified in the court order. The area lay within seasonally flooded forest, on a steep slope tangled with roots, accessible only via the old maintenance road from Fulton Dam. Sarah Duvall commanded the scene, coordinating with Dr. Martin Coyle for stratigraphic oversight and ground-penetrating radar (GPR) technicians. A 20-10-meter rectangular zone was marked off with string. In hazy early morning light, the GPR machine began its low hum, the antenna sweeping slowly across the ground, producing a seismic map of the subsurface sediments. After more than an hour, the screen displayed 3 anomalous returns. The clearest was an oval area with a uniform concave boundary, approximately 1.3 meters deep and 1.6 meters long, the classic profile of an old, slightly collapsed burial pit. Coyle reviewed the scan and confirmed, "Not natural. Edges too clean, tool disturbance evident. Duval ordered excavation to begin. Layers of alluvial soil were carefully removed with trowels, shovels, and brushes, every step filmed. Depth was measured with steel tapes. The soil was soft, wet, and carried a strong organic smell. At 0.9 meters, the trowel struck something hard. The technician paused, cleared the surrounding area, and gradually a grayish-white bone mixed with mud emerged. A human femur. As more soil was gently brushed away, an entire human skeleton appeared, lying on its left side, with arms pressed against the chest. Near the cervical vertebrae were fragments of decayed gray fabric and a few dark hairs still attached. Duval immediately halted all mechanical movement, ordered photography and site mapping. Near the victim's right hand, the technician spotted a glint beneath the soil. After gentle rinsing with distilled water, it was revealed to be a small silver ring engraved inside with EP. Everyone fell silent for several seconds. Only the continuous click of camera shutters could be heard. As the soil around the skull was cleared further, a thin gold chain emerged, 1970s style, with a small teardrop pendant. Duval logged E24, jewelry, and E25, fabric fragment. Excavation continued through the afternoon. The skeleton was recovered piece by piece under cold storage conditions, documenting pelvis, spine, and dentition. Beside the left ribs was a long metal object resembling a jacket zipper pull. Dr. Coyle noted in the log, burial pit 1.3 m deep, artificial shape, compacted soil at edges, estimated dug September, October 1979, based on soil decomposition layers. Moisture, color, and organic distribution confirmed disturbance at that exact time, coinciding with Eleanor's disappearance. All bone samples were transferred to the Columbia Forensic Lab for identification and DNA testing. Meanwhile, the GPR team scanned the surrounding area but located no second burial. On July 14, forensic anthropologist Dr. Rachel Haskins began examination of the remains. She determined female sex, height 5 feet 4 inches, biological age 30-35, matching Eleanor Price's 1979 profile exactly. The upper incisors showed silver fillings consistent with her dental records. The fourth rib had an old healed fracture matching Eleanor's 1978 medical file injury. For official confirmation, bone samples were sent to the Columbia DNA lab for mitochondrial sequencing. On July 18, Dr. Carney personally extracted met DNA from the femur and compared it to the stored profile of Eleanor Price's mother from the missing persons database. When the results appeared, the mitochondrial sequences matched 100%. The report concluded briefly, remains identified as Eleanor Price, confirmed by mtDNA and dental records. Duval received the report that afternoon. She said nothing, only stared at the bold confirmed identity line, then signed the closed identification section. The 40-year missing person case now had a positive victim identification. That same day, the forensic team returned to the burial site for additional subsurface soil samples to date the disturbance. Organic carbon analysis showed the soil was last disturbed circa September 1979. 2 months, aligning with Eleanor's disappearance and Lawson's departure from Missouri, the final 26-page scene report detailed the sequence. GPR anomaly detection, excavation of 1.3 m pit, recovery of human remains, fabric, jewelry, and full victim DNA confirmation. Maps, layer-by-layer photographs, and mineralogy results were attached. Duval transmitted the report to the MIB director and Callaway County prosecutor on the evening of July 18th. In the conclusion, she wrote, "Excavation at South Fulton located burial site of victim Eleanor Price. Geological, biological, and physical evidence proves victim died and was buried in an area Lawson had authorized access to. This is the keystone, closing the entire chain of events. As night fell, the riverbank site was temporarily covered, floodlights shining on the muddy water. Duval stood watching for a long time. The cold wind off the river carried the feeling that a case once thought lost to time now had the voice of truth rising from the earth. 2 days after the DNA results confirmed the remains found on the South Bank at Fulton were Eleanor Price. The Missouri State Prosecutor's Office, in coordination with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, issued a formal arrest warrant for Jerry Lawson based on 3 categories of evidence: matching DNA, items seized at his residence, and excavation results. At 6:30 a.m. on July 20, 2018, a BCA tactical team under Inspector Mark Holden surrounded Lawson's 2-story Bloomington home. Sarah Duvall had flown in overnight from Jefferson City and was present on scene with the original warrant and full supporting documentation. When officers knocked, Lawson appeared in pajamas, looking tired, surprise in his eyes, but no resistance. Holden read the warrant aloud. Jerry Lawson, you are under arrest pursuant to Missouri state law for first-degree murder in connection with the 1979 disappearance and death of citizen Eleanor Price. Duvall stepped forward and confirmed identity using his old passport photo. Lawson asked only one question. I thought that whole thing died with the past. No one answered. 2 officers cuffed him and led him to the patrol car. A supplemental search team simultaneously executed an additional warrant. In the upstairs office, they recovered a small wooden box containing numerous black and white Polaroid photos taken along the Missouri River. One showing Lawson standing beside a sign reading Maintenance Road. Authorized personnel only. In a desk drawer was a 1979 September weather notebook with the entry, 12/9, heavy rain road muddy. Everything was sealed as E26, photos and E27, field notes. In a closet, technicians located a small tin box containing a rusted worn metal key tag engraved Lakeview Inn. Room 7, direct evidence linking Lawson to the original crime scene. Duvall, wearing gloves, carefully placed the key tag into an evidence bag and signed for it on site. When finished, Holden read the complete seizure list: 3 packets of Polaroid photographs, 1 engineering field notebook, 1 motel key tag, 4 personal items. Lawson was transported to the Hennepin County Detention Center, pending extradition to Missouri. In the car, he remained silent, staring out the window. At BCA headquarters, Duvall held an emergency video conference with the Callaway County Chief Prosecutor to finalize the charging package. She presented the full chain: Red Wing 877 boot tread match, DNA matches, Missouri stratigraphy soil on boots, excavation recovery of remains and victim jewelry, and additional items from the suspect's home. The chief prosecutor confirmed sufficient basis for criminal indictment. Recommend full file transfer to Missouri within 48 hours. On July 22, Lawson was flown under federal escort on a private aircraft. The plane landed at Jefferson City at 17 o'clock. He was immediately transferred to Missouri State Prison, solitary temporary cell. Duvall personally signed the transfer receipt. Suspect Jerry Lawson, Dobbers Sapi, 1951, taken into custody per warrant, M7944 IR condition secure, no injuries. All evidence was handed over to the Missouri State Evidence Vault under Level 1 security sealing. That evening, MIB issued an internal press release. After nearly 40 years, the suspect in the Eleanor Price disappearance has been arrested. Scientific and physical evidence confirms Lawson's direct connection to the crime scene and burial location. Case file transferred to the Missouri State Prosecutor for indictment. In the small conference room, Duvall set the nearly 300-page case file on the table. On the cover, stamped in bold red letters, State of Missouri vs. Jerry Lawson. She knew the case was not over. But the hardest part, finding the truth, was complete. As the cell door closed behind Lawson, the metallic clang echoed like the final reverberation of 40 years of silence, marking the historic moment when every link in the investigation, from the mud on a pair of boots to the bones beneath the earth, had connected into a complete indictment. After Jerry Lawson was arrested and all physical evidence was transferred to the Missouri State Prosecutor's Office, the investigation team led by Sarah Duvall began the phase of fully reconstructing the entire sequence of events in the case to complete the indictment file. This was based on the 1979 crime scene data, witness statements, physical evidence, and excavation results. With support from the MIB Criminal Analysis Laboratory, Duvall reconstructed the timeline of the night of September 12, 1979. The night Eleanor Price disappeared. According to original records, Eleanor clocked out at 7:15 p.m. from her accounting office in downtown Fulton, left the building in her own car, and arrived at Lakeview Inn at 7:40 p.m. The motel manager confirmed she stopped at the front desk to pick up mail and buy coffee before returning to room 7. At approximately the same time, Lawson, an engineer working at Fulton Dam, left the construction site via the south maintenance gate at 7:30 p.m., roughly 3 miles from Lakeview Inn. Site logbook entries and witness statements showed he was driving a gray Ford pickup and wearing Red Wing 877 boots and green work pants, matching descriptions given by witnesses who saw a man near the motel area. Based on the location of mud-covered footprint E1 found beside the back door of room 7, Duvall determined that Lawson had parked near the rear fence of the motel and approached the room through the side entrance rather than the main gate. The footprints went only one way inward, with no outgoing prints. On the rear wall there were mud smears and chipped paint, indicating the door had been forced open. The working hypothesis: Lawson came to meet Eleanor to discuss something related to work or a personal relationship. An argument broke out, leading to fatal consequences. Forensic experts simulated the scenario based on scratch patterns and the position of furniture in the room. The bed was still neatly made, with no signs of a prolonged struggle, indicating the confrontation was brief and occurred near the door. A heavy blow caused Eleanor's head to strike the edge of a table or the wall, resulting in cranial trauma. The 2018 forensic report from the Columbia lab noted a fracture in the left occipital region, consistent with blunt force impact rather than an intentional strike with a sharp object. This supported the likelihood that the victim died unintentionally during a scuffle. After realizing Eleanor was unconscious, Lawson likely panicked, believing she was dead. The widespread mud prints inside the room showed he moved around the scene for a while, then performed a cursory cleanup, possibly using EP's handkerchief, later discarded at the riverbank, and dragged the body outside, wrapped in the bedsheet. A pillow bearing his hair indicated Lawson leaned close to the bed, possibly to check for breathing or white blood. The deeply imprinted E1 footprint at the back door proved he left the room carrying a heavy load. From there, Duvall reconstructed the route from Lakeview Inn to Highway 54, turning south through the Fulton Dam construction access road, using the maintenance gate key he had been issued. Near the turnoff by the auxiliary pump station, Lawson stopped and initially dug a shallow grave with a worksite shovel. Soil stratigraphy analysis showed the burial pit was dug with the same type of tool used on the dam project, and the surrounding soil contained machine oil, typical residue from maintenance equipment. When heavy rain began that night, the mud quickly covered the site, preventing detection. Duvall requested the technical unit to simulate the route using digital mapping, 5.7 miles, approximately 15 minutes driving time. The interval between Lawson leaving the dam site and Eleanor being last seen was only 40 minutes, more than enough time to dispose of the body. In the spatial reconstruction, technicians used 3D mapping to recreate the 1979 landscape. The simulation depicted a gray Ford truck, stopped on the riverbank, headlights shining on wet mud, a lone man dragging a heavy object wrapped in cloth, digging a grave on the slope less than 2 meters from the water's edge. He then tossed several small items into the river, possibly the victim's personal belongings or evidence. Missouri River current analysis showed that light objects like a handkerchief could drift upstream to the location where evidence E2 was later recovered. Regarding cause of death, the forensic team determined the primary injury was cranial trauma from impact. There were no signs of strangulation or stabbing. There was no evidence of premeditated murder, but concealing the body and retaining evidence demonstrated intent to cover up a crime. Carbon isotope analysis of the bones established time of death as the night of September 12, 1979, perfectly matching witness statements and the fact that Lawson quit his job 3 weeks later. From all the data, Duvall created an event sequence, 1940. Eleanor returns to her room, 20 o'clock. Lawson leaves the dam site, 2020. Approaches the room, 2025. Altercation, 2030. Victim dies, 21 o'clock. Leaves the motel, 2130. Arrives at Riverbank, buries body, 22 o'clock. Returns to motel, erases traces, takes ID card and keychain, as keepsakes, 2230. Leaves Fulton. All data was compiled into a 42-page reconstruction report, including maps, crime scene diagrams, and simulation images. The report was submitted to the Missouri State Prosecutor's Office on July 25, 2018. Its conclusion stated, "The sequence of events is closed, the mechanism of injury, and subsequent concealment are fully consistent with all physical evidence." Lawson was the last person to see the victim and bears direct responsibility for the death of Eleanor Price. When Duvall signed the final page, she knew that every detail from 40 years earlier, the footprints, the river mud, the neatly made bed, had finally fallen into a coherent chain, making the picture of that rainy night in Fulton, in 1979, as clear as if it had just happened. After the case reconstruction report was completed, Sarah Duvall continued to request additional forensic examinations to strengthen the integrity of the entire evidence chain before the file was transferred to the Missouri State Prosecutor's Office. On July 27, 2018, all samples, including mud, bones, fabric fibers, and items seized during the search of Lawson's home, were resealed under the supervision of MIB technical representatives and the prosecutor's office. First, Dr. Martin Coyle and the geology team performed a final comparison of sediment from the Red Wing 877 boots with soil taken directly from the burial pit. Using Raman spectroscopy and energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, they confirmed identical mineral composition, more than 70% montmorillonite and illite, with 0.02 mm iron oxide particles, unique to the South Fulton area. Pollen analysis detected ragweed pollen in both samples, a seasonal species found only along the Missouri River in September, further confirming the burial date. In parallel, the Columbia Forensic Biology Lab conducted environmental DNA testing on soil adhering to the bones and fabric recovered from the grave to determine whether any third-party human DNA was present, besides Lawson and Eleanor. Results showed only 2 human DNA profiles, the victim and Lawson, with no indication of subsequent tampering. From Lawson's DNA found in the soil samples, experts confirmed he had directly participated in digging the grave or handling the body, as his epithelial cell DNA adhered to mineral surfaces. The lab also re-examined the hair recovered from the 1979 motel pillow to ensure storage integrity. Original archive records were cross-checked against yearly transfer logs, confirming the sample had remained sealed from the closure of cold file #47 in 1981 until reopening in 2018. Old seals bearing Sergeant James Darnell's signature and distinctive blue ink marks were clearly intact, guaranteeing absolute legality of the chain of custody. A custody monitoring report issued by the Missouri State Evidence Room stated, "There is no evidence of tampering or alteration. Every seal opening was witnessed and properly documented." Concurrently with the mineral analysis, the biology team used nitrogen and carbon isotope ratios in the bones to confirm the burial environment, detecting characteristic Missouri River water infiltration, proving the body had never been moved. Oxygen-18 isotope values in the bones matched river water samples taken at the excavation site, providing further geographic confirmation. Meanwhile, the BCA Digital Forensics Lab in Minnesota completed testing of the 3 Polaroid film canisters and the work notebook seized from Lawson's home. Spectral analysis showed 1 canister had been exposed in September, October 1979, based on chemical degradation of polycolor thick emulsion, with random positioning marks corresponding to GPS coordinates at Fulton Dam when overlaid on modern maps. Ink and paper analysis of the notebook confirmed late 1970s origin. The carbon black ink type ceased production in 1983. Entries 9/12. Heavy rain and check south inlet were written in the same ink as the rest of the notebook, ruling out later addition. Duvall compiled all results and ordered a comprehensive technical forensic report containing 11 sections: mineral examination, environmental DNA, victim identification, geographic isotopes, paper photograph examination, ink analysis, evidence seal verification, custody chain confirmation, photographic dating, boot origin confirmation, and corresponding physical evidence. The 162-page report, coded Forensic Summary, State of Missouri v. Lawson, July 2018, was signed by all relevant department heads. In the conclusion, Duvall wrote, "Every evidence chain from the 1979 scene to the 2018 excavation has been verified as intact and uniformly linked, ensuring admissibility in court. Physical, biological, geological, technical, and documentary evidence all point to the same conclusion: the presence and actions of Jerry Lawson at the scene." 3 copies were made, 1 sent to the Missouri State Prosecutor's Office, 1 retained by MIB, and 1 archived in the St. Louis Evidence Vault. On July 30, 2018, Duvall signed the final page, applied the official seal, completed the forensic examination phase, and prepared the file for formal indictment. As she left the evidence room, she paused to look at the old box labeled Cold File #47, now fitted with a new cover, knowing that the fragmented chain of evidence spanning 40 years was finally closed without a single gap in the journey to recover the truth. On August 2, 2018, after receiving the complete forensic reports and chain of custody verification from the Missouri Bureau of Investigation, the state prosecutor's office formally indicted Jerry Lawson. In the 47-page indictment, signed by Missouri Chief Prosecutor Helen Cartwright, Lawson was charged with 3 main counts under the Missouri Criminal Code: first-degree kidnapping, tampering with physical evidence, concealment of a corpse, and obstruction of justice by intentionally concealing criminal evidence. The indictment stated, based on scientific evidence and witness testimony, Jerry Lawson approached citizen Eleanor Price on the night of September 12, 1979, in Room 7 of the Lakeview Inn, Fulton, Missouri, inflicted injuries resulting in unintentional death, then transported and buried the body on the south bank of the Missouri River to conceal the crime. The introductory section listed the full chain of federally recognized evidence: 21 locus DNA matches, Red Wing 877 boot prints, matching evidence, E1, boot sole mud matching Missouri stratigraphy, victims' personal items recovered from Lawson's residence, and Fulton Dam site maps showing his exclusive access. Prosecutor Cartwright added, elements of concealment include Lawson's deliberate digging of a grave, erasure of traces at the scene, removal of evidence, and immediate departure from the state. The obstruction charge was supported by his retention of evidence for decades and destruction or concealment of dam project records to hinder verification. Duvall, as lead investigator, attended an emergency meeting between the prosecutor's office and MIB to finalize the prosecution strategy. She summarized the investigation from rediscovery of the boot print to DNA testing, excavation, and arrest. Legal advisors confirmed the evidence structure is closed. Although premeditated murder is not proven, there is sufficient basis for kidnapping resulting in death, corpse concealment, and obstruction of justice. After review, the prosecutor's office decided to proceed with kidnapping with fatal consequences to allow the maximum possible sentence of 40 years to life. On August 4th, the case file was formally transferred to Callaway County Court, the jurisdiction where the crime occurred. All evidence, forensic reports, and custody records were copied and transported in 3 sealed containers by armored vehicle under state police escort. During the handover, Prosecutor Cartwright briefly stated, 40 years is a long time for truth to be restored. Today's indictment rests not on memory alone, but on science, data, and the persistence of those who never forgot. The court accepted the file the same day, assigning case number 18, CF 447, Callaway. Chief Judge Edward Hanlon signed the summons for defendant Jerry Lawson and scheduled the preliminary hearing for late August. While awaiting trial, Lawson was held in Missouri State Prison's Special Security Wing with permission to meet his private attorney 3 times per week. The prosecution also requested a freeze on his personal assets for future civil restitution. In internal meetings, Duvall and the technical team continued reviewing all documents to ensure every piece of evidence presented in court had verified origin and transparent custody history. The final comprehensive report sent to the prosecutor's office contained 7 sections: investigation file, DNA analysis, geology, forensic anthropology, physical evidence, Lawson's movements, and event reconstruction, each section countersigned by at least 2 independent experts. On August 8, 2018, the Missouri Prosecutor's Office released an official statement to the media. 39 years after the disappearance of Eleanor Price, scientific evidence has led to criminal charges against suspect Jerry Lawson, age 67, of Bloomington, Minnesota. This is the first cold case in the state prosecuted using modern genetic genealogy and stratigraphic analysis. Public attention grew. Local media covered the story extensively. Under the cold lights of the prosecutor's conference room, Duvall silently gazed at the wall map of Fulton, marking a 39-year journey of a missing person, now closed by a formal indictment, carrying 3 clear charges, opening the next phase of trial. The trial of Jerry Lawson officially opened on the morning of August 27, 2018, at Callaway County Courthouse in Fulton, Missouri, presided over by Judge Edward Hanlon. Courtroom security was heightened, with representatives from the state prosecutor's office, the MIB investigation team, forensic experts, and a 12-member jury selected after 3 days of voir dire present. Defendant Lawson appeared in a gray suit, calm in demeanor, seated beside defense attorney Robert Keene, a former federal prosecutor, now known for defending clients in high-profile cold cases. Lead prosecutor Helen Cartwright headed the state's team. Sarah Duvall was called as both expert witness and investigation representative. The session began with the reading of the indictment: 3 counts, first-degree kidnapping, tampering with a corpse, and obstruction of justice. Lawson exercised his right to silence, entering a plea of not guilty. After procedural matters, the prosecution delivered its opening statement, emphasizing that scientific evidence has crossed time to speak for one who cannot. Cartwright presented key exhibits: photographs of the Red Wing 877 boots, full DNA matches between Lawson's hair and the 1979 evidence, and soil samples proving his presence at the burial site. The large courtroom screen displayed the original Polaroid images, enlarged E1 footprint, and photos of the boots seized from Lawson's basement. Douglas Kearney was called as the first witness, explaining the STR-DNA process and concluding absolute identity, random match probability, 1 in 58 billion. He detailed the indirect Minnesota sampling, testing protocol, and storage method. Defense attorney Keene cross-examined aggressively, arguing samples 40 years old could suffer integrity loss and cross-contamination. Kearney replied firmly, all samples bear seals and were verified through 9 independent custody checks. There is no evidence of contamination. The prosecution then moved to footwear evidence. Dr. Martin Coyle presented 3D modeling of print E1 and a 93% sole pattern match with Lawson's size 10. 11 Red Wing 877 boots, highlighting identical features: 3 horizontal grooves, oval logo, and uneven right heel wear. Keene challenged, "You say 93% match, so 7% discrepancy could belong to hundreds of others." Coyle answered, "Correct, but the probability of 2 different pairs wearing identically, combined with DNA and soil data, is astronomically low. Science does not say absolute certainty, but every path leads to the same individual." Next, the prosecution displayed physical items, Eleanor's Missouri ID card, Room 7 keychain, the dam site notebook, Fulton dam maps, and Polaroid photos of the riverbank area. Each item was placed on the evidence table, sealed, and shown enlarged on screen. Duvall took the stand and described the entire investigation from reopening the file to locating Eleanor's remains. When Keene asked, "Do you have any evidence my client intended to kill?" Duvall replied simply, "No, but I have evidence he intentionally hid a dead woman and kept that secret for 39 years. The response silenced the courtroom. After the lunch recess, the defense presented its counter-argument. Lawson and Eleanor may have known each other, DNA could result from innocent contact, and Eleanor's death was accidental. Keene stressed the absence of eyewitnesses and lack of weapon-inflicted wounds. The prosecution immediately rebutted with forensic reports showing the occipital injury could only result from heavy impact, and Lawson was the sole person present based on DNA and footprints. The jury viewed the complete excavation photo series, skeleton, evidence, mud traces, and young photos of Lawson at the dam site. The atmosphere grew heavy. One female juror wept upon seeing the EP engraved ring on screen. In the final segment of the day, the prosecution focused on evidence continuity. Cartwright presented custody records year by year, transfer logs, and confirmation from 7 legal witnesses, concluding, "No evidence chain in Missouri forensic history has been preserved and verified more thoroughly. Every stamp, every signature, every storage code matches. 40 years could not blur the truth." When the session-ending bell rang, the judge instructed the jury to return in 2 days for closing arguments. As court adjourned, Sarah Duvall watched Lawson being escorted out, his face still composed, eyes vacant, as if no longer anchored to the present. Inside the courtroom, late afternoon golden light filtered through the windows, falling on the Red Wing 877 boots inside their glass case. The weathered evidence had become the symbol of the entire case, of justice traveling 40 years through dust to stand in today's light. 2 days after the final arguments, on the morning of August 30, 2018, the Callaway County Circuit Court jury returned to the courtroom after 11 hours of closed-door deliberations. Judge Edward Hanlon asked everyone to rise as the court clerk read the verdict. The room fell completely silent, broken only by the faint rustle of paper. "We, the jury, having considered all the evidence and testimony, find the defendant Jerry Lawson guilty on all 3 counts of the indictment: first-degree kidnapping, concealment of a human corpse, and obstruction of justice." Lawson stood rigid, eyes fixed on the floor, showing no emotion. A low murmur rose from the gallery. Many local residents who had followed the case for months wiped away tears. The judge called for order, then read the 12-page sentencing opinion. He emphasized, although this crime occurred 40 years ago, modern forensic technology has produced scientific evidence that is impossible to refute. Genetic genealogy, DNA, footwear impressions, and physical exhibits all point to the same conclusion. Lawson was present at the scene and bears direct responsibility for the death and concealment of Eleanor Price's body. He then imposed the sentence, 40 years imprisonment at the top of the guideline range for kidnapping resulting in death, to run concurrently with the sentences for the 2 additional counts. Defense attorney Keene moved for a downward departure, arguing no intent to kill and the victim's death was unintentional, but the prosecution countered that the decades-long concealment and silence constituted a conscious choice to deny justice. Judge Hanlon denied the motion, writing in the judgment, "The defendant chose silence over accountability." Every subsequent action demonstrates clear consciousness of guilt. As the clerk read the final portion of the sentence, Lawson said nothing. He merely clenched his fists and stared straight ahead. Deputies escorted him from the courtroom in silence, the soft clink of handcuffs the only sound in the packed room. Outside, reporters waited, but Duvall simply walked past without answering any questions. At the afternoon press conference that same day, Callaway County prosecuting attorney Helen Cartwright declared, "Today, the Callaway County Circuit Court has marked a historic legal milestone for the state of Missouri. This is the first time in Missouri criminal jurisprudence that genetic genealogy DNA evidence has been accepted by a court as both admissible and of direct probative value in securing a conviction. She explained that the process, using the GED match database to identify distant Lawson relatives and then comparing indirectly obtained DNA samples, fully complied with court rules and was independently verified by 2 separate laboratories. Genetic genealogy has ushered in a new era for cold case investigations, Cartwright said. It doesn't just recover truth, it restores a voice to the missing. The 40-year sentence was carried on every major news outlet in the state that day. Many headlines called it the case that marks a turning point in Missouri forensic science. In his final remarks, Judge Hanlon also acknowledged the investigative team. The court commends the Missouri State Highway Patrol, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and the forensic experts who pursued this case with determination for 4 decades, proving that justice may be delayed but cannot be buried. Simultaneously, the MIB issued an internal memo. Cold File #47 is officially closed with a final enforceable judgment. All exhibits are retained as reference standards for future cold cases. In the permanent court archives, the last page of the judgment contains the notation, based on scientific evidence and unbroken chain of custody, the court recognizes the constitutional validity of DNA genealogy as an investigative tool. That ruling became binding precedent, permitting Missouri law enforcement agencies to use public genetic genealogy databases in other unsolved cases. As the proceedings ended, a light rain began to fall over Fulton, the same kind of rain that had fallen the night Eleanor Price disappeared 40 years earlier. Duval stood alone in the courthouse courtyard, watching the drops land on the cold stone steps. She knew the long journey of the case had finally come to an end, with a sentence, with legal recognition, and with the voice of science reaching across decades. After Jerry Lawson's 40-year sentence became final, the Missouri State Highway Patrol initiated permanent archival and preservation procedures for the entire case file. State of Missouri Viff Lawson, under the state standards for records of exceptional historical and scientific value. On September 10, 2018, lead investigator Sarah Duval, along with representatives from the State Evidence Repository, the Columbia Forensic Laboratory, and the Callaway County Prosecutor's Office, gathered at the Columbia Evidence Archive to reseal every item of physical evidence, DNA samples, digital data, and original reports. The preservation vault is located deep in the basement of the Missouri State Forensic Institute, maintained at 18 degrees Celsius and 45% humidity behind double-layer security. Each evidence package was unsealed for condition inspection, photographed for confirmation, then resealed with red state evidence seals bearing the designation Cold File #47. Eleanor Price. First came the old metal box containing handkerchief E2, Red Wing 877 boots, driver's license, and room 7 key fob. Technicians verified seal numbers against the original inventory and noted condition stable, no physical degradation. The boots were placed in small vacuum containers with desiccant and relabeled E20, preserve. The monogrammed EP handkerchief was laid in an acid-free fabric-lined glass tray in textile storage drawer 04B. The driver's license and key fob, the 2 most symbolically powerful items, were sealed in antioxidation Mylar sleeves and stored separately in Cabinet 22, alongside copies of crime scene photographs. The Columbia DNA Lab also returned every biological sample used for testing, vials containing hair E09, bone and soil samples from the burial pit, and digital genome sequence backups. Original tubes were placed in work 25°C freezers labeled E09, DNA, primary, while digital copies reside on the state's encrypted SHA 512 servers. Concurrently, the MIB digital team created a complete electronic case file. All 2,845 pages of documents, photographs, reports, ground-penetrating radar data, and stratigraphic maps were scanned, assigned unique identifiers, and logged with access tracking metadata. The Columbia Evidence Archive system provides 3 security tiers: judicial, research, and training. Genetic genealogy materials are marked restricted and may be opened only by court order or approved scientific study. Duval personally reviewed every inventory line and signed the final full evidence retention record. She requested one additional symbolic item, the silver EP ring, be placed on permanent display in the Cold Case Hall of the Forensic Institute as an emblem of cases solved through DNA technology. Beyond the physical items, the entire file was also digitized into permanent encrypted format, with automated 24-hour backups to the St. Louis data center. The technical unit issued electronic certificates of authenticity bearing digital signatures from the MIB director, the state attorney general, and the Columbia Forensic Institute director. Each certificate was printed with an encrypted QR code for future verification. At the archive facility, final sealing was completed at 1940. The words, "Closed file, verified and archived, September 2018, were stamped on the hard copy jacket beside the official Columbia Evidence Archive seal. Duval watched the old metal evidence box, the same one that had gathered dust for nearly 4 decades, now neatly placed on a new storage rack. Everything had been closed in proper order: physical items, reports, data, judgment, DNA. No piece was missing. In the final summary, she wrote, "The cold file #47 evidence chain is preserved in its entirety, according to Missouri state standards, with permanent retention. This file now serves as reference material for future cold cases and as proof of the enduring power of scientific evidence." As she signed the last line, Duval looked at the dates printed on the label: 1979, 2018, 40 years reduced to the space between 2 hyphens. In the corridor outside, cold white lights reflected off the metal sign Columbia Evidence Archive, Section D, mirroring both her silhouette and the silent rows of cabinets. In that stillness, she understood that the Eleanor Price case was no longer merely a pronounced sentence. It had become part of Missouri criminal investigation history, preserved, certified, and kept forever. On September 15, 2018, 2 weeks after every item of evidence and the complete case file of State of Missouri v. Lawson had been sealed and archived at the Columbia Evidence Archive, the Missouri State Highway Patrol submitted its 186-page comprehensive post-case evaluation report to the Missouri Department of Justice. The report consisted of 3 main sections: operational process review, evidence preservation analysis, and recommendations for improving cold case investigation standards. Under the direction of the MIB director, Sarah Duval chaired the drafting committee in coordination with the Columbia Forensic Laboratory, the State Attorney General's Office, and the Callaway County Prosecutor's Office. The report's purpose was not only to close out the Eleanor Price case, but to establish legal and technical precedent for future cold cases. The first section detailed the entire investigative chain from the 2018 reactivation through trial in 5 phases: 1 archive file assessment, 2 genetic genealogy DNA testing, 3 non-biological evidence analysis, 4 interstate and interagency coordination, and 5 courtroom evidence preservation. Duval clearly identified the unbroken and transparent chain of custody, maintained without deviation for nearly 40 years, as the decisive factor in the case's success. Every original seal bore the handwritten signature of first-generation investigator James Darnell, and each reopening, documentation, and resealing matched perfectly. The report noted this as one of the rarest instances in Missouri judicial history in which a file remained perfectly preserved across 4 decades, thanks to duplicate storage at the Columbia Forensic Lab and the State Central Repository. In the evidence preservation section, Duval's team described the transition from physical items to digitized records. Every object was scanned, encoded, and stored on the Columbia Evidence Archive system, with scheduled backups and 3-tier access controls. Federal laboratories certified the process as ISO SUL IEC 17025 compliant and suitable for training purposes. The MIB technical analysis identified 3 critical integrity factors: stable storage environment, mandatory 5-year inspections, and minimum necessary access authorization. The report also recommended that the Department of Justice increase funding for cold storage facilities, especially for legacy DNA samples, because most 1980s, 1990s cold cases remain undigitized. The second section focused on genetic genealogy technology, evaluating benefits and legal risks. Under the heading Investigative Use of Public Genetic Data, Columbia experts detailed the GED match process, distant relative verification, and privacy safeguards. The report concluded, genetic genealogy played the decisive role in identifying suspect Jerry Lawson, but it must be governed by specific legal frameworks to balance public interest against individual rights. It proposed adding a new subsection to the Missouri Criminal Investigation Code, allowing use of public genetic databases in unidentified suspect cases only with prior court approval. The third section evaluated interstate coordination. The project was deemed a model for multi-state collaboration, with Missouri and Minnesota sharing data, supervision, and extradition seamlessly. Forensic specialists from the Minnesota BCA, Columbia Forensic Lab, and MIB were recognized for creating the most effective horizontal coordination structure ever seen in cold case work. Among the recommendations, Duvall proposed establishing a regional Midwest Cold Case Analysis Center in Columbia to centralize genetic data, unidentified remains, and evidence from neighboring states. She also called for mandatory post-case review protocols. Every reactivated cold case must produce an independent process evaluation report to prevent errors and standardize procedures. In its official response, the Department of Justice noted, the Eleanor Price case provides the scientific and administrative foundation for a comprehensive overhaul of Missouri's forensic storage system. The MCCA proposal will be considered in the 2019 fiscal plan. Appendices included full evidence storage flowcharts, sealed item inventories, and side-by-side procedural comparisons between 1979 and 2018, illustrating investigative technology progress. When the final printed copy was delivered, Duvall signed beneath lead investigator. She looked at the small print on the cover, post-case evaluation, cold file #47. The case was no longer simply the story of one forgotten woman. It had become the operational standard for the entire Missouri forensic system, from preserving a handkerchief or a muddy boot print to safeguarding a 40-year-old DNA sample until science could finally speak. The post-case evaluation report quickly became the basis for an even more comprehensive document, the final operational summary report for cold file #47, Eleanor Price, completed at the end of September 2018. Under the MIB director's oversight, Sarah Duvall was tasked with writing the concluding chapter, evaluating the nearly 40-year investigation from the initial 1979 response through successful prosecution in 2018. The report was structured in 3 parts: 1 chronological operational timeline, 2 lessons learned regarding evidence preservation and DNA technology application, and 3 proposal to incorporate the case into investigator training curricula. The first part recounted the entire history, from Sergeant James Darnell receiving the missing person report on the morning of September 13, 1979, documenting footwear impression E1 and handkerchief E2, to the file being sealed as cold file #47 in 1981. That early phase was identified as the foundational stage in which the first physical evidence was collected, under primitive technological conditions, yet with sufficient rigor to survive 4 decades. The report stressed that without Darnell's meticulous documentation, coordinates, and proper preservation of the handkerchief, boot print, and soil samples, the later evidence chain would have had no legal value. The second part examined the 1981-2018 frozen period, when the case lay dormant yet items were periodically inventoried to ensure integrity. Duvall noted, it was precisely the steadfast preservation of evidence, even when no one still hoped, that made reactivation possible, nearly 40 years later. The third part detailed the reactivation phase, when genetic genealogy and sediment analysis were applied. The report identified the technical breakthrough as the marriage of ancient DNA with public genetic databases, enabling distant relative identification and ultimately Lawson. Simultaneously, Raman spectroscopy stratigraphic analysis pinpointed the exact burial location, creating a three-dimensional link between DNA, physical objects, and geology. Duvall wrote, "The Eleanor Price case is the quintessential demonstration of the power of combining traditional evidence preservation with modern forensic science. A single hair, an old boot print, and a speck of soil, seemingly meaningless when reassembled by science, reconstructed the truth." In the physical evidence analysis section, the Columbia forensic team listed the pivotal items: footwear impression E1, handkerchief E2, and hair E09. The report observed that the physical evidence chain was maintained for the longest continuous period ever recorded in Missouri investigative history, 39 years, and remained fully admissible. The DNA technology section described mitochondrial and nuclear DNA extraction from aged samples, genome sequencing, CODIS and GED match comparisons, and privacy protections. It concluded, "The application of genetic genealogy represents a revolutionary advance in cold case investigation. The technology not only opens new investigative avenues, but also raises new ethical and legal requirements regarding citizen genetic data." Regarding evidence preservation, Duvall's team presented the Columbia Evidence Archive System as the national standard model, with sealing, periodic verification, and digital encoding all meeting federal criteria. The Department of Justice recommended replicating the model statewide. The final section was devoted to investigator training. Drawing on the case experience, Duvall proposed making cold file hash 47, Eleanor Price, a mandatory module in Missouri's Advanced Criminal Investigation course, so future generations would understand the value of physical evidence and the importance of long-term preservation. Training topics would cover accurate scene documentation, chain of custody management, recognition of future retesting potential in old samples, and interstate coordination protocols. The report concluded, "From a seemingly hopeless missing person case, cold file hash 47 has become an operational exemplar. No detail was ever discarded, because even the smallest trace can become the decisive piece when science takes one more step forward." 300 printed copies were distributed to the Department of Justice, the Columbia Forensic Institute, state police academies, and federal agencies. On the last page, Duvall wrote, 40 years, one case, and one lesson for every generation of investigators. Justice may be slow, but it will arrive, if the evidence is kept and the truth is never abandoned. On October 5, 2018, 3 weeks after the final investigative report was completed, the Missouri Bureau of Investigation officially uploaded the entire case file for cold file hash 47, Eleanor Price, into the National Cold Case Database, the national database dedicated to resolved cold cases. The upload process took a full 48 hours and was carried out by the digital technical team from the Columbia Evidence Archive in coordination with the State Attorney General's office. The entire data chain was encrypted and automatically cross-referenced with national records to confirm the case's uniqueness, then permanently assigned the identifier NCCD Mo 47, 1979. The file contained all crime scene photographs, physical evidence, DNA data, forensic reports, trial transcripts, and the official judgment from the Callaway County Court. Upon completion of verification, the system displayed a green notification line, "Case status resolved," verified by State of Missouri. This marked the 22nd cold case in Missouri state history to be officially labeled resolved, more than 3 decades after it was first opened. That same day, in the basement of the Columbia Central Archive facility, Sarah Duvall presided over the formal case closing ceremony, an administrative ritual that carried deep symbolic meaning. In storage room D4, under bright white lights that illuminated rows of steel cabinets holding hundreds of other cold case files, the metal box labeled hash 47, Price Eleanor, was placed on the inventory table. Every piece of evidence, Every document and every digital backup was checked one final time and matched against the master index from the Missouri Department of Justice. The box was then sealed with a new red evidence seal bearing a QR code linked directly to the NCCD entry. Along with signatures from representatives of three agencies, the MIB, the Columbia Forensic Institute, and the State Prosecutor's Office, the technician then entered into the archive log. October 05, 2018, cold file #47 permanently archived, status. Closed and digitally archived. Duval affixed the final label in raised lettering that read resolved case, and signed beneath the authentication section. Everything took place in silence, broken only by the scratch of pens and the metallic click when the lid was closed. When the box was returned to shelf 22 in row D4, among dozens of other cold case boxes, the wall clock read 1745, almost exactly 40 years since that autumn afternoon in 1979, when Eleanor Price was first reported missing. The file was now closed. There were no more open investigations, no more pending notes. At the very end of the system record, an automatic entry appeared. Case closed permanently, evidence preserved indefinitely under Missouri law. Outside the storage room, at MIB headquarters in Jefferson City, an electronic copy of file #47 was transmitted to the National Judicial Statistics Office for inclusion in the Resolved Cold Cases Historic Records section. The accompanying Missouri State Report confirmed that the Eleanor Price case was one of the longest-running cold cases in state history to be solved through genetic genealogy, with a duration of 39 years and 23 days. The data was added to reference sections used by the FBI and the National Academy of Forensic Sciences of the United States, both of which later cited the Price case as a model precedent for the ability to resurrect investigations through long-term evidence preservation. At the same time, the Columbia Forensic Institute installed a small commemorative plaque in the hallway known as Cold Case Hall. Engraved in brass were the words, Eleanor Price, missing, found, justice restored in 2018. Cold file #47, State of Missouri. Beneath it were the names of the lead investigators, James Darnell, Sarah Duval. The brief ceremony concluded in a solemn atmosphere, with no media present, only a few forensic staff and representatives from the State Department of Justice. Duval was the last to leave. She stood for a moment, gazing at the long rows of steel cabinets. Each drawer held an unfinished story, yet also a hope that more files would one day be reopened as technology advanced another step. In an internal memo to her superiors, she wrote simply, Cold file #47 is closed, but the chain of professional value continues. This case proves that if evidence is preserved, time cannot conceal the truth. 1 week later, the NCCD released its annual statistics of the approximately 18,000 active cold cases nationwide. Only 1.7% had been solved using genetic genealogy. Among them, the Eleanor Price case ranked 5th among the oldest cases closed through scientific evidence. The public report noted, Missouri 1979, Eleanor Price, 39 years to resolution, case integrity, preserved. The resolution was regarded as a milestone in Missouri criminal investigation history. A disappearance once thought permanently lost to oblivion had become a classic example of the power of science and the steadfastness of the justice system. At the end of October 2018, technicians at the Columbia Evidence Archive performed the final periodic check, confirming that box #47 was tightly sealed with no discrepancies and signed the record case sealed. October 2018. The final archived report carried the line, Eleanor Price, case closed, evidence preserved, justice served. And so, exactly 40 years later, the 1979 Missouri missing person case was officially closed, leaving behind a complete file in the state's judicial history, an everlasting reminder that justice may be delayed, but it never disappears. The story of the Eleanor Price case, Missouri 1979 cold case, is not only a journey of solving a crime after nearly 4 decades, it is also living proof of faith in the value of perseverance, science, and societal responsibility. In the context of today's United States, where civic values, justice, and transparency are considered the foundation of the rule of law, this case reminds us that justice can be slow, but it is never lost so long as people uphold integrity and respect for the truth. The detail of the handkerchief embroidered with EP that was preserved for 40 years has become a symbol of intergenerational responsibility, that every careful action taken today can deliver justice tomorrow. The fact that James Darnell in 1979 still meticulously documented and sealed the sample even without supporting technology demonstrates the power of professional ethics, something modern technology can never replace. When Sarah Duvall and her forensic team in 2018 used DNA genealogy to reconnect the investigative thread, they proved that science only reaches its full potential when built on a foundation of accuracy and belief in human values. For contemporary American society, where data and artificial intelligence increasingly dominate every field, the Eleanor Price story is a reminder that technology is not just a tool to go faster. It must be used to go deeper into the truth. The lesson for every individual is never underestimate the small things, because sometimes a single correct decision, one preserved piece of evidence, or just one honest act in today's work can become the key that reopens justice for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on the journey to restore justice for Eleanor Price. Proof that the truth can never be buried by time. Please subscribe to the channel to continue accompanying us on future cold cases where the past still has stories left untold.